No, that's gonna be cool. I don't know how to remember that. It's great. Yeah, I have. There is. I've got a little magnifier. All right, over, you're all set.
Okay. I'm gonna call this meeting of the planning commission to order on November 13th at about 4:32. First item, citizens to be heard. If there's anyone out there or in the room who has a comment on something that's not a public hearing tonight. Probably nobody online. Okay, any ex parte communications or disclosures?
I did some work for Mark and had dinner with him last week. And I've been,
Made nachos.
yeah, which was very nice. And then I also have done work for Kevin about his ADO.
And is there anything we should know, kind of communications about it that probably isn't in the record here?
No, we had just gone over things and
Great.
me and Mark like to, butt heads. And all the rest.
Good, it's actually very good, if there is any additional information, it's good for everybody, to know, so that's great. Next, item up is approval of the minutes. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Passing. That's unanimous. And let's see here. Presentation, and I don't think Trish is here. Was somebody at the county commission meeting?
I can probably speak to that. Yeah, Trish wasn't gonna be able to make it for this one, but we did have the HGHO revisions, were voted on, and the commission, there was quite a lengthy discussion on whether or not to include, the exception for condominiums, for ownership of condominiums to be, so that they wouldn't have to be, they wouldn't have to be deed restricted for ownership, but only occupancy, sorry. And they actually ended up voting, a couple different ways. There was an amended motion, but it ended up that, the condominium exception didn't get approved. So it just went back to the original version that they had presented at the packet, for the previous meeting when the public hearing was open, which was all the revisions that we had settled on, except for the condominium exception. So that was the one that got approved. So basically, the inclusion of workers all throughout the 84532 zip code are now eligible for HGHOs, and what else? We clarified the ownership rules for owners of apartment buildings and projects, and then when developments get transferred ownership, like the entire development, the builder or the developer who owns the development does not need to be qualified as an eligible household. That can be outside investor. And the ADU rule basically came down to if an ADU is in an HGHO property, that unit is restricted to occupancy by family members of the HGHO owner. Those were the big ones.
Was family member specified? I know that had come up in one of our discussions in terms of like first cousins, immediate family. What is the definition there?
I want to say it said immediate family members. So however you want to interpret that, I guess there might be some room for interpretation there.
Okay. It just in anticipation of confusion and trying to avoid any sort of similarities to what we had with the rules and regulations clarifying the ordinance as written in the first place, it might be helpful to work with the county attorney to make sure that those are specifically documented in the rules and regulations, and that way there's just no risk for any misunderstanding at some point in the future.
Yeah, I could actually see that going, that would be, maybe be a good thing to add to our Article 11 definitions. Just to straight up define family member or immediate family member.
I can ask, does it say immediate family or would it be family per the definition in the land use code? Because there's a definition.
Oh, there is a
here.
definition
Yeah.
already in our
So
land
it
use code?
says family is two or more persons related by blood or marriage or between whom there is a legally recognized relationship.
Oh, well, that would probably be the most applicable. Yeah,
So that would include parents, parents-in-laws, but not cousins, for example.
Related by blood or marriage.
related by blood or marriage. So I think cousins would actually.
Oh. All right. Doesn't matter. I maybe just making sure it's in the rules and regulations is probably not a bad idea, just to be specific, but that's
Yeah.
the end of my thoughts there.
Was there anything else at county commission in regards to? Oh, there was the rezone public hearing, the Kimberly rezone. Went forward, the public hearing was opened for that and. There was not a ton of discussion. It was just kind of presenting the staff report and there was one public comment, which was in favor or?
The one young man that spoke before the actual public hearing was not in favor. We did get
Yeah.
one write-in comment that was in favor of the application as well.
Yeah.
And I guess they're gonna have the substantive conversation at the next action item meeting.
So that'll get voted on at the next meeting, next county commission meeting. That was it. I think that was really the bulk of what happened at county commission.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of our meeting schedule for next year. And I think the proposal probably on the table to start with is we'd still do this meeting the first and second Mondays. And
Second and fourth.
at 4:30, unless that schedule doesn't work for people. And the second item is apparently our meeting for December is on Christmas Day.
Yeah, so how do we feel about either just canceling that and or trying to reschedule it? The calendar's a little tight in terms of trying to reschedule that, but.
And I would say, for me, it would depend on if there's something important coming up. I can imagine meeting the week before on a Monday at the
Right.
same time.
The 18th.
But I think given the season, people probably wouldn't mind having the meeting canceled if there wasn't something important.
Are you
Okay,
saying
on the
second?
23rd?
The 25th is a regularly timed, or would be the fourth.
Then the next Monday is New Year's.
Yeah.
Right, that's not gonna work. I don't know, I'm not doing anything. I'll show a pistol. I won't be out of town.
The
25th is a Monday.
25th
Yeah.
of 2020.
Usually
Oh, is that?
Yeah.
This is your schedule for next year.
No.
Yeah.
Understood.
Well, yeah, we were doing that, and then but we also have to deal with the fact that our last meeting of the year is on the 25th. So.
So do we have any other comments
You think we
on it, or do we want to leave it where I just put it?
can we leave that decision pending until the first meeting of the month of
I'm
December?
hoping we can. If we don't,
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think we don't have to decide tonight, but yeah, I think it could work that your idea will be of, moving it to the 18th, which would be the Monday, the week prior to Christmas. That could work, so. Maybe once we have, a full, board at our next meeting, we could
good,
make that decision.
good. And then maybe depending on if there's a fair amount to do, we should probably have that
Mhm.
meeting.
Right.
Do we need a vote on this schedule?
Yes,
We do need a vote. So, I guess, do we need a motion on it?
We have a recommended motion on the 24 meeting schedule. We could get that out of the way.
Okay,
Yeah,
So I'll move to approve the 2024 meeting schedule to remain the same as it has in previous years, being the second and fourth Mondays at 4:30 p.m.
give a second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. So now we have the interview schedule, and I just want to do a couple of things here, which is, I think the people who are going to be interviewed have this list of questions that we have. Is that right? That was sent to you? Good. And we normally have had these questions a little bit less formally. That is, everybody's had a question and they've asked it themselves, but this is a question for the commissioners here. Maybe since they're already put down with a name on it, do we want to still have the individual people who did those questions ask the questions? Or are we okay with just having me reading them off?
As the person who's often in the past been facilitating this, I think having you read them actually probably makes the most sense. It would make sure that they're consistent from candidate to candidate and probably help you get through it a little more efficiently. So.
Okay,
I think that's a good idea, especially since some of the people aren't here.
okay, so we're gonna do that. And the other thing is when we do vote, remember that any single person could say they want it to be a ballot vote that we will hand to Elisa, and she can tell us the results of that, or we can just vote out loud. Either one we can do, but any single member in our rules, then it will be a secret ballot. Okay. And let's see. Well, first up, I don't really care. Shall we? Okay.
Just don't know how to do this anymore. I used to sit up there.
You want to do this by having me ask one of the questions first to one of you and one to the next?
Sure.
Is that okay?
That's good to me.
Okay, Mary, what are 2 or 3 major issues that you see as issues facing Grand County in terms of planning?
Well, the most important thing the planning commission does is the general plan. And from the general plan, then you implement the zoning code, and then you can do zoning code based applicable coming out to present to you. I noticed in just a little bit of a review that I was doing, I didn't go through a lot because I've been here too much of my time, so I didn't really do a lot of review, but there are some Senate bills and bills in the state that are being looked at and being ready to pass in regards to changes to some of the regulations we currently have. With that going on, it also states it'll probably be a big change for either amending or rewriting our general plan. My guess is it's an amendment because I think the general plan is not less than 5 years old. And then you have to implement those changes into your land use code. Those are things that are going to have to happen pretty quickly after those get passed. I don't know if you're aware of them, if they've been talked about. Anyway, that would be the 2 things I think the planning commission in the next year would have to look at. And there's going to be a lot of other things. I haven't kept up on current events, what's going on in the planning commission. These are just things I know that happened recently. So those are the 2 things. And those are 2 things planning commission has always been most important thing for them to do is general plan and code amendments. So, and those take a long time. I don't know that we ever went through a general plan in less than a year.
Mark, same question. What are 2 or 3 major issues that you see as issues facing Grand County in terms of planning?
Can you hear us okay on Zoom there, Emily? I'm finding increased traffic. When I go out, I'm finding the traffic is more and more intense, and it's going to become more and more intense in time. I know UDOT handles the the highway, but, when we, provide bonus density, for example, we're not really addressing traffic and we're not really addressing water. Those two things, that concerns me. I would like to see an emphasis put on South Moab, what I call South Moab. That's the south end of town. I see it, what I keep hearing is, well, we should have the density down near the urban, center. But I find that just a way to, I just don't think that's what the future holds. I think the future holds a second city center on the south end. Like I picture a dumbbell with all the weight on one side. It doesn't work for me. I see development in San Juan County. And I think all those people in San Juan County's overnight rentals are going to be driving down to Moab. I see that increasing the traffic. I would like to see a second city center on the south end of Moab. What else? Obviously, I don't know what we can do about the cost of property, but I think we could do something about the cost of property taxes. I myself, in my time here, I've spent $90,000 on property tax. I can only see that going up and up and up. I'm 70 years old. My property taxes are, $5,600 this year. What are they going to be 2-3 years from now? I'm curious. Obviously, the impacts of tourism. I have ideas how to address some of those.
Okay, second question, I'll have Mark go first.
Good idea.
Young adults in Grand County are finding it difficult to afford conventional homes in conventional neighborhoods in Moab. Grand County, we should say also. What are your thoughts on alternative zoning practices like mixed use zoning, high density housing, etc.?
Yeah, I think of Grand County as Moab also, though I know the difference. High density housing, that bothers me because of the traffic and the water issue that you're not mentioning. One idea that I've thought of is we should have what I call a housing communal purchasing group. Let's say there were people approved they're looking to buy a house, and then a piece of property comes up. They could apply to the communal housing group, design it for what fits on the property, and then make it available to members of the communal housing cooperative. I don't see that as a government organized thing, but it would be a way for a person to approach, say, with a 10-acre parcel or a 100-acre parcel, and have a design appropriate for the parcel created. That would take a year, and then it would be made available to people in the communal housing group.
And Mary, same question. Young adults in Grand County are finding it difficult to afford conventional homes in conventional neighborhoods in Moab. What are your thoughts on alternative zoning practices like mixed use zoning, high density housing, etc.?
I'm still gonna fall back to the, first we have to figure that out in our general plan. General plans are gonna give us those guidelines. General plans are, like I said, take a long time, a lot of public hearings, a lot of people from the public are invited to attend to those. And we need to review that, make sure it fits what we need, but the alternative housing, one of the bills that they're talking about in the state is actually moderate housing, which is a word we have, I remember we talked about it, but it was always left in the background because everybody was talking more about affordable housing, but there is moderate housing that we need. And we also need to realize that I live in the city, I live in a subdivision. I've lived there almost 50 years, although we have property in the county, and there are empty houses. So, is it something that planning commission, county council can do, or is this something more to do with financing or problems in other areas? I don't know if that's the issue. Honestly, until we look it up, till we figure it out, till we kind of research, and that was a little bit of what I was doing today, was trying to figure out where the problems are. It's kind of a question I don't know. I kind of feel like it's something we need to review. I've heard that same problem for as long as I can remember. People want to move here, but where are they going to move to? Well, our population hasn't changed that much. If you look at our census, and if you go clear back into like 50 years ago when I moved here, we've only grown like 2,000 people, a little over 2,000 people. And I know there's a lot of houses out there working in the building department. They're building 30 to 40 houses a week, a year. So who knows? So questions, I think, planning, but commission, the planning department, we need to kind of look into and see where they're going with that.
Okay, and Mary, again, question, is ownership or affordability more important?
I think
What would you be your philosophy on addressing the housing
It's
crisis?
definitely a philosophy. Because it depends on the person. I mean, I obviously is a baby boomer who wanted to own a home. But I have a daughter that has no desire to ever own a home. So I think it's the person, how the people feel. And once again, it's gonna be affordability on both sides, whether they decide to buy, whether they decide to rent. But those are questions, the philosophical question that planning commission can discuss, but they can't fix it.
And Mark, same
Right.
question.
Well, it's the same answer, I think, both and everything in between. I myself, I'm a Taurian. I want land. Land is important to me. And I'm blessed with that. Other people want all the things I don't have. They want to hike and bike, and come home and sleep in a comfortable, safe place. For me, if a person wants to own land in this town now, I don't know how. The house down the street from me on less than a quarter acre, $650,000. I don't know how that, you either have to have family money, you sold your house in California or what. So in order to make land affordable, you better make the lot smaller. How small does a lot have to be under $100,000? Not much bigger than this room, I would say. I guess that's the approach. We need apartments, tiny homes, mixed use development. My design for my subdivision included a variety of housing sizes, thus they would be a variety of housing prices. And I guess I'm gonna coin a phrase. I'm gonna think tiny homes are great, but I'm thinking a tiny condo. I'm semi-serious, but in this day and age, a footprint lot with a livable house and a place to park one car and a bike. And that's about as affordable as it's gonna get for a while unless there's an adjustment to our national economy.
Okay, back to Mark. From a planning commission standpoint, can you describe a few key changes that could be made to improve housing affordability situation in Grand County? And what obstacles might need to be overcome to implement these changes? And of course, some of these questions overlap oftentimes.
They do overlap. I scarcely was able to answer this except in the same way. It might be beyond the scope of the planning commission, but a group purchasing is an idea I've had, and people approved. Otherwise, what works is the philanthropic purchase of land. Like, what's the name of that subdivision? Arroyo Crossing. Somebody bought the land. That's the most expensive part. Land is $200,000-300,000 an acre. I mean, that's if you can take that element out, and people are just buying their property, but even then, building a house is expensive, man. I can't say I have solutions to this, but I would love to be part of the conversation about it.
Mary, same question.
Um, For years, the planning department and the planning commission has worked on, every year there's something else that comes up and we look at our general plan and we try to figure out, every question that's asked at the beginning of a general plan, and it's not a regulatory document, it's only a recommendation. Planning commission is only a recommendation department. They are not regulatory either. So if you look at your general plan and you've got in there where you feel building higher density is available to them. And I agree with Mark, water and sewer is kind of a big deal. I've noticed San Juan County's got, housing going in on smaller lots. The city of Moab has changed their zoning in a lot of areas to 5,000 square foot lots. And that's been in place for quite some time, but you don't see anybody building on them. Of course, we can't make contractors come in here and do it, and as governments, we are not, we don't buy land and we're not real estate agents, so we don't do that. All we can do as a planning department is look to see where that works. We also got to realize that, and I was in a meeting one time and it broke my heart when this happened, when people, they made a remark about the fact that it was all of us gray haired people at the meeting. And they were there to complain about the fact that they were trying to put higher density in adjacent to their properties. And, young people need to live here. Well, young people do, and we do need new housing, but there are people that have lived here, obviously, for years. And I live in the city. I don't mind living close to somebody, but there are people who don't. And I think we need to respect that. We need to respect that a lot. We need to pay attention to where that can happen, because if they're growing a garden, somebody builds it, which can happen now, a 3-story building, they lose their sunlight. Those are things we need to look at. That's why I think the general plan, I'll keep bringing that one up, of course, but the general plan is so important because that's going to be our guideline. That will be where we look at to see where do we want that to actually happen? Where is the land the most suitable for that? Obviously, to me, it's closest to the highway, but then you're making a corridor and you're losing that openness that people feel when they drive through. So that's where I feel it comes from.
And again, Mary, what is a specific update to the land use code or new ordinance you would like to see enacted to improve planning outcomes within Grant County?
Well, I haven't kept track of everything that's been going on, so I can't tell you. But once again, like I said, I've been kind of watching what's going on in the state, and definitely we're going to have to do some of that. But I also think that when I was talking about air and light, and which is important, it's important to me. I live in the city. I have a a little bit bigger than a quarter-acre lot. I still have air and light, and to take that away from people is going to be hard, because people need the sunshine. We don't want moon effects over us. When I look out my kitchen window, I see the side of my neighbor's house. Well, I'm used to that, but there are people who want to look out in their backyard and see the cliffs, and people are buying that. And we need to be careful of how we handle any upzoning of anything, and how much housing we're going to put next to somebody who's lived on an acre lot, or even a half-acre lot for their entire life. That's important to me. I think it's important to a lot of people. So those are the ordinances I think we need to really pay attention to, is pay attention to where we're putting things and how we're putting them together. Mark talking about building little tiny communities together. Okay, we got 10 acres. Let's put all the houses together, but leave the outside open. Open space is going to be a very important thing because we're losing our land. And we've talked about that for as many years as I can remember.
And Mark, same question.
I'm not telling you I have the answers. I don't have answers, but I want to be part of the discussion. And my answer to these questions is a greater community engagement policy. There is no way for a citizen to approach this group and speak for more than 3 minutes and never a time for a back and forth. I think there needs to be a policy of greater community engagement. Why? It's not, you can take comments in writing, but a person can't approach any of the commissions for more than 3 minutes. I find that frustrating. Never time for back and forth. These commissions, these bodies take comments, but it isn't a discussion. It isn't a round discussion. We're not really engaging the community and getting ideas. We got 7 people here. What, we've got the answers? I'd say apparently not. I think the answers are out there in the community, and what we need, in my view, my platform, my policy is to increase public engagement. So does that answer your question? That's my answer to the question is getting more community engagement and getting ideas from people who are, I don't know, I feel largely disenfranchised from this process. And, you know, I've applied for this planning commission no less than a half a dozen times over the last 25 years. I have had ideas that had they been taken hold 20 years ago, we wouldn't be in the problems we're in right now. Overnight rentals, there are 450 of them now. And we just coincidentally need 450 houses for people to live in. You know, these are comments I've been making for 25 years. And I don't know, I have these ideas and I want to bring them out. May I just say, I have a comment to make when we're done with these questions, Bob. That's all right with you.
And Mark, describe how you would approach a landowner requesting an upzone to their property for higher density. For example, from large lot residential to multifamily residential.
It's very interesting. This question came from Steve, who I wish he were here tonight. I think it's quite amazing that he's not here, right? It's interesting that he's developing one of these sort of things. What would I do if somebody brought that before the planning commission? First, I'd listen and hear, you know, what their concept is for their development. I'd wonder how it affects adjacent property owners. With respect to, yeah, I would listen to how it affects adjacent property. For example, in my neighborhood, there were 7 acres approved for HDHO, and those buildings would have towered over single-story, small lot residentials, you know? So I think, you know, you take them as they come. You listen to what they've got, what the plan is for it, and I would encourage. I would love to hear more community engagement, more comments. Where is everybody? I wonder. We scarcely hear public comment at almost any of the meetings in this town, and I find that. But the budget passes without public comment. Anyway, that's my take on how to improve. What would I do? Okay, it's quite a jump from a large lot residential to MFR. How many acres would there be? What would be the benefits of the community? What might the tax implications be? Again and again and again, I generally oppose bonus density because we're failing to address water.
And Mary, same question.
Same answer, not his answer. It's the general plan, back to the general plan. But what does the map tell us? Where is it the most available? But I agree 100% with some of the stuff that Mark just talked about, where in processing that, emergency services needs to be talked with, the road department needs to be talked with. One of the problems we always had the hardest time with is when you tell them, well, your roads have to be this wide. Well, why do they have to be that way? Because, well, I don't know, if you drive on some of those small roads, it's hard. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of traffic. We do need to worry about that. And drainages, of course, we all know where that's going and where it's going. And we're working on those things. We're working on them all the time. But once again, it's check your zoning or check your general plan. where it has the community, because the general plan is a community document. And I don't know that you've ever noticed, but when we have processed our general plans, we get 50, 60, 75 people to these meetings generally, and that is important for them to be there, because they're the one telling us, this is what we want to see. Every one of them is, what do you want our community to look like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Well, every single time we've written that or talked about that, it's never high density housing. And if it is, provide the open space with it. Okay, we can put the houses close together, protect the water, protect the sewer, put them all together, but give us some open space along with it. I don't know if that's in there. I know at one point the general plan did have the land use code had a section that protected single family homes from that moving effect, where you had to be so far away, there was a large setback. And so those are the things you can and should pay attention to when you're reviewing rezones, when you're reviewing anything that's going to change the fabric of the land.
And Mary, again, thinking about, this is philosophical question. Thinking about private property rights and regulations and zoning, how do you balance these with sometimes competing values?
Well, once again, it's back to protecting what's there and protecting what somebody is asking to do or wanting to do. And if there are private property, we all have private property rights, and we all want to provide, live and be happy and have our own little sanctuary. Everybody does that lives in Grand County, Moab. My backyard's my sanctuary. So the dog barks. I live next door to people with dogs. I expect that, but there are people who want to live in a little bit more wider open space. And I think we need to understand and be a little bit more empathetic to the people that actually live here now and have lived here a while. Because I'm going to be gone someday, and so will Mark. So, and once we're gone, they can do whatever they want.
Not on my property.
So Mark, your answer to that question.
Well, I look at things according to what I call the 8 commandments. Those are the 8-fold purposes of the land use code, page 1. And it talks a great deal about discourage development that poses unreasonable public costs and providing adequate public facilities. So here comes an HDHO thing, and we're going to need to widen the road approaching it eventually, but that's a public cost. And property ownership is a right in America, and it's a blessing. I'm blessed. It comes with benefits. It comes with the responsibilities. Property owners pay taxes that keep things running around here. I mean, a good chunk of the bread comes from property taxes. Renters pay property taxes too, I understand. Zoning, hopefully, will protect my investment in my property, as Mary says. I don't want to, sorry, is there somebody? I don't want a 3-story apartment building next to me. And unfortunately the zoning in my neighborhood prevents that. I just hope for a pleasant and safe place to live, and I hope that for everybody. I think I accept zoning and I oppose upzoning simply for profit, that there should be a net positive gain and not a loss for our community.
Okay, and what I forgot to do, what we should do now, because not everybody knows everybody, is, kind of a brief statement about, what experiences do you have in terms of that make you good for this job, and maybe Mark will hate this, maybe 3 minutes, but maybe a little bit longer if you actually, maybe a bit longer if you actually need it, because we already know a little bit about you, but
Thank you,
go
Bob.
ahead and I'll let you do this.
I appreciate that. My name is Mark Horowitz. I'm 69 years old. I've lived in Grand County for 40 years. I believe I'm qualified to sit on this board. I understand the land use code generally, especially the eightfold purposes of the land use code. 17 years ago, I designed a subdivision plan for my 14 acres, which received stellar reviews for design, for a variety of housing sizes. Each house in my design had a mother-in-law unit that would be for a caretaker or workforce housing. Yes, back then they were talking about workforce housing. My main reason for applying here is to encourage discussion, more citizens engagement. I hear it mentioned often. We heard it mentioned sometimes 50 people attend a meeting. I want more in community engagement continually, not constantly. I often wonder why there's nobody at these meetings, no public comment. I put the citizens first. The reason we have citizens first on the county commission's agenda is because I made that happen. The reason we have a second citizens to be heard at a time more appropriate for working citizens at 6 o'clock is because I had that happen, made that happen. I would ask for a conversation about establishing a P&Z member as a citizen engagement director, a volunteer position, member of this commission. Currently, the conversation is you accept input, but it's not a discussion around. And I want to develop a process for a conversation, a round conversation, not a one-way conversation. To that end, I'm going to encourage a Thursday evening county meeting devoted to citizens to be heard in person, in Zoom, and broadcast on YouTube with a commission member liaison and a moderator. We might have an agenda item, but a citizen is not limited to 3 minutes. And there can be conversations in a meeting of that sort. I want to establish a program I call Civics 101, available to any citizen to educate them, especially prospective commission members. Bylaws. The whole process, right through the budget, should be available to citizens to be able to. I want to be an engaged, inspired, and creative member of the conversations in this board. I've expressed my concern about overlays like HDHO, that they could be ill-advised or outright problematic, and I think that's proven to be the case, and I think it will prove to be the case. I think we're doing HDHO and high density as our solution to problems created by the past, and that we're creating tomorrow's problems today in many cases. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And Mary.
For now.
And Mary.
Should have let me go first. I've lived in Noya 50 years, raised kids here. I belong to every committee there is, from PTA to catechism teacher. I have watched my community grow. I've watched people come and go. And I'm still just nosy. I spent 30 years working in planning, and I drive down the street and want to know what's going on. So I thought maybe throw myself into this again, just to help, see what's going on. I'm big in process and procedure. It's my big thing. Helping people understand that my job was forever. And hopefully I can still do that. There is a procedure, there's a process for it. And people need to understand it. We're not up here just making laws and telling people what they can do. That's not our job. Our job is not to tell people what to do. Our job is to tell them that they have to follow rules. And we don't like to follow rules, but there's got to be a way to do it. And that's what I'm here for.
Great, thank you. You wanted to say one thing at the end, or did you get to
That was
say-
my one thing.
That was your one thing.
But the bylaws indicate that the 3 minutes should come first, but I appreciate that you got to that.
Great. Okay, I guess we're ready to, I guess we can, yes,
We
go
were
ahead.
just, trying to figure this out, because Tony was supposed to come on, he's not here. I don't know how you feel about having such a sort of a short, a small quorum, whatever. We would vote on this tonight. I mean, Mikkel just brought up the idea that we could postpone the vote to the next meeting, but that's just totally throwing it out there to you guys.
So that everybody would have a chance to vote, and maybe we could ask people to watch this if we
Right.
did that.
Because I know McKenna just got back to me and she actually had a horrible bike
Like
accident.
accident.
I didn't know that, so she's not able to. She probably would like to be, she planned to be here for this, but. Emily had something to say?
I only wanted to let you know that, because we had to set a specific date, I don't think it'll be a big issue, but my official end date is November 30th. And that date was intended to allow for the vote at this meeting and the vote at the county commission meeting so that there was a full commission at the next planning commission meeting. So if there were to be any sort of public hearing and a lack of quorum was there, I mean, it's one seat, so it might not be an issue, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that, OB.
Well, what do other commissioners think?
Yeah, if it weren't through I guess what is today? Do we get one more meeting yet this month?
We do, it's on the 27th of November is our next meeting. And then the county commission would be the very next day. It's actually one of those weird weeks where we have planning commission, county commission back to back. So
Oh, so it's not an issue. Oh, I guess that I didn't realize that in the scheduling. We had missed that.
yeah, the only problem with that is that it would be tight to try to get. Well, we could add the item on the agenda for the commission to make the appointment. It just wouldn't be. I'm just saying, we wouldn't be able to get anything in the packet by the Wednesday deadline for the county commission. But that might not be an issue.
On one hand, I hate to delay again, but on the other, I like the idea of giving the other people an opportunity to have their voice heard. I guess there's a pro and a con. I'd be okay with either way.
I think there's not a lot of difference between the two candidates. So we're gonna get a perspective. I'm sorry, like a political difference. I think you kind of have like what I hear is like a certain viewpoint that's very similar. And like Emily's stepping down that has a very different viewpoint than this. And I'm like, well, to me, it's just kind of like, there's a couple things that we're gonna get a feedback from how you guys answered the questions. I feel like a similar type of feedback that we're going to get from both of you guys, so it's not like, hey, we're choosing two different complete polls, oh yeah, we want, this idea or this idea. I'm like, well, you guys kind of have the same viewpoint. That's what I'm kind of like, let's get it done, but that'd be my thing.
Yeah, I guess if we did delay it, I was just looking, that November 28th commission meeting was just, where they were rescheduling because of the elections happening on the 21st. So then there's another county commission meeting the very next week on December 5th. But that's when either if we don't get it, if they don't vote or if they don't appoint the person on the 28th, it'll only be until next week that we would have to wait for that.
So just a question out of the blue, what happens if we get a split vote? Because we have 4 people here, it's possible. 2 and 2.
So if we don't have a vote that goes through, the vote wouldn't carry, and then somebody could make an alternative motion, but that alternative motion could be to table the vote, the issue until the following meeting. So there is the possibility that if there isn't a consensus at this meeting, that it sort of naturally gets tabled anyway.
Mark?
May I be recognized?
Yeah.
I greatly respect the three other members of this committee and of this board, and I'd like to hear that I would like to have their input, frankly.
I've been in these meetings on that, I know what you're gonna do.
And OB, if you wanted to, I'd be comfortable making a motion or, we'll be present at the next meeting. So, it's your choice how you want to handle this one.
Sure, you want to make a motion?
I would make a motion. And I'll preface this by saying, having been on the other side a handful of times now, I know how difficult it is to both listen to people who are applying and try and make a difficult decision between them and also apply for a board. That being said, I would move to recommend Mary Hoffine for the position, and I would love to make some comments explaining why, but I'll hold my comments to see if there's a second for my motion first.
I'll second.
Okay. I think both people who are applying are admirable members of our community, who have both been very involved in our community for quite some time. And I think both bring a very interesting perspective and interesting ideas to the table. And I think that we would be in a good position regardless. The reason that I recommend Mary is, well, first of all, having had the opportunity to work with her for many years while she was the administrator for planning and zoning, it was clear to me that she had a deep understanding of the process, had an empathy for people on all sides of the process, and is able to separate what may be emotional for her in terms of her thoughts on different issues from, making sure that we are being consistent and fair and deliberate as a body. I think even this evening, hearing her speak about the general plan, we've had a lot of concern raised about public clamor. Mark raised concern about public input. I think that is very legitimate. The general planning process is the time when people have the most access to the planning process. When we reviewed our general plan and then each of the subsequent amendments held many public meetings with hundreds of people in attendance across them. And I think finding a way to balance fair justification at the legislative decision-making moment with long-term planning and consistency in the general plan is the only way that planning is effective. And it's actually what's laid out in our state code for the role that the Planning Commission plays is to interpret and update the general plan and make recommendations to the legislative body. And I just think that Mary brings a wealth of knowledge and a very balanced perspective to a very difficult subject. And her expertise would be greatly valued on this body. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Very nice.
Any discussion? Got a motion on the table.
I'd like to just add a couple comments. So that the big difference I see between the two is Mary has experience and process knowledge, and that's a great asset. Mark has fire in the belly, and I admire that.
Always has.
Yeah, so I think it's a very difficult decision, I guess. It's great that we have two very qualified candidates here. Unfortunately, only one gets the nod on this one. But boy, I love aspects about both of them.
Yeah, Mark's definitely been at almost all of our meetings commenting. He's applied a lot of times. I'm like, I think it's time to see the dog catch the car for once. Mary definitely, like your experience, like, geez, like Mark, it's like, I know Mark's probably, I'm guessing hasn't read the land use code like you probably have, like so many times
He has.
during the thing. But I'm just saying, like, I mean, that's a huge thing. I'm like, man, on any of our other past candidates, I'd be like, yeah, go ahead. And I'm like, man, Mark is the one person who disagrees with me the most that I know, so far. And I'm like, well, we need a good sparring partner, I think, for some of the things that we've had, like, and I have a feeling through some of your things that you would disagree with me and most of my like takes on affordable housing. Which I think we need that because we kind of have been voting from a consensus pattern all the time. We've been like, oh yeah, it's been a unanimous decision, not just for passing the minutes, but for like, other things. And I'm like, well, it'd be good to come on headlong into like some arguments against some of the schemes that we have. So I'm just, that would be my take. I just.
I was leaving space for OB to comment, but
I'm torn also, and I didn't realize actually what motion. I thought we were at the time talking about whether we should go to having all 7 people.
oh,
Good.
you were talking about a motion to table. I'm sorry, OB. I
So,
didn't realize that was what you were going for.
Pieces of me who think it would be nice to have all 7 people vote on this issue.
You can introduce an alternative motion since we haven't voted on this one. And then if that carries, then this would go the way of the.
Well, then and as chair, I can do that on an alternative motion.
Yeah, you could make a motion to table until the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to table until the next meeting, this decision, so we would have a larger representation of commissioners.
And I'll second your motion to table.
I think tabling makes sense since I gave the motion. I think tabling makes sense because it really is an important decision. And I think we need the diversity of opinion and gives everybody a chance to vote on this issue. So, is there any discussion on the alternative motion? We're gonna vote on it. How many are in favor of tabling this, and this vote? We've got 3, and so
We need 4 to carry.
no, we do not need 4 to carry on this motion. That's my understanding, because it's internal. Do we need to vote then on this motion after we've? We're
Nope.
done. It's tabled.
So what this would do is it would untable the item, but then the motion that I put on the table would be on the table at the next meeting. So what it would mean is when we pick this back up, we have an active motion of recommending Mary. And so we would vote on that or vote it down or have an alternative motion that somebody could make at that point to change the recommendation.
Sounds wonderful.
Good job, Bob. Thank
And thank you to both candidates. You've made it so I'm also torn.
Well, we're both, if you choose Mark, my heart would break, so don't worry.
What did you say?
Okay,
OB, we were talking about, I know we might have a couple other things before we get
yes,
to our.
this is good.
But, I actually had something come up, that I might need to leave early. So we were gonna request if we can move my future land use plan item to the top of the discussion list.
This is the review of feedback and scope.
Yes.
Yes. Why don't we, if there are no objections, why don't we move that item to the next item?
Okay, if you guys can manage, it's kind of a pile here, but there's kind of a packet.
These are all in our packet, right?
No,
Oh, wait,
it's actually not in your packet
Okay.
because always seems to be a challenge to get these materials prepared with everything else that's going on, and it's not one of those.
There you go.
Is this, are you handing out the packet or is this an addendum to the packet?
Supplemental material that was not in the packet.
Would you mind emailing that to me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Actually, Emily, I'm gonna share my screen for just a minute with the first piece of the packet that everybody's gonna be looking at, and then I will email you as well while I'm
Thank you.
talking.
I appreciate it. And Obi, I had let Elisa know that I do have a conflict a little bit later this evening. So if Tony arrives, I'll probably drop, but I can stay on as long as necessary to maintain a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. Good to have you in the reserve there.
I'm staying on the bench as long as you need me.
On your successor.
Looks like at least one more meeting.
All right, so this is just, this is a draft scope of work. And I'm just kind of trying to get this out in an RFP within the next, week or so. It's been, I was trying to get this finalized in October, but it got pushed out. But I thought that I would get your feedback on what we're looking at this point in time, with the future land use plan. So far, this has really just been drafted in-house by planning staff, and it really has included a lot of our hours and time, but more and more, the reason it's not getting done is because we don't have a ton of staff time to actually spend on the future land use plan. So, and we are also at a point where we don't have the skill set to provide the next kind of level of work that needs to happen in order to create the draft or the final version of the land use chapter, which is a lot of visual, renderings, drawings, trying to get the concepts of what we're talking about with the future land use designations in a way that we can all easily understand what we're talking about in terms of the built form that each of these new zoning land use designations are, and what the streetscapes might look like. And really, we need a consultant with those kinds of drafting skills to come up with some of these elements. So when I talk about this, I'll switch over to an example that I found that's really great. And I apologize, my laptop just died, so I don't know why I can't use it right now, but it's making things a little bit difficult. So what I'm talking about when I describe it, like finalizing the revised land use chapter, but also working to take the entire general plan that was updated in 2030 and put it into a more cohesive, user-friendly format. Right now, it's kind of, I'll show you what we have. We have this. Are you seeing the appendix A, Emily?
Yep, it's showing up well.
Great. So this is all the stuff that's in the printed out packet. I will email it to you, but just
Thank you.
I'm done with the presentation. So right now, this is what we have. This isn't actually what was adopted, but this was what if you'll remember back when John was here and we had the consultants that were helping out with the future land use analysis. Well, they only got so far, and this is kind of their version of the future land use plan, or the land use chapter 6 of the general plan. So they took what John had originally drafted and they kind of expanded on it, organized it a little bit differently. But overall, it's still just a huge list of policies, an endless list of policies. And for each section, it kind of just rambles on. It's not the most in my opinion, I don't think it's very user-friendly. I don't feel like we would go back and reference a lot of these things. I just think it needs to be more condensed and, organized differently. So there's just a lot of information in here, and I almost feel like it was just an effort that was kind of rushed at the time. So what I would like to do is, we're gonna go through and revise the content in here, and we're also gonna be updating this whole section down here, which is really the meat of it, which is the land use descriptions. And that's what you have in your hand there. The land use descriptions have been revised immensely over the last year that we've been doing all of our public outreach and looking into researching different examples of different land use plans and coming up with better ideas of what could fit our community. So that list has changed drastically from what's in here. So this would all be updated. And then the pictures, instead of having these pictures, I envision actually having like drawings that would be more consistent. Like we wouldn't have different styles of architecture, but it would be more about the form and kind of trying to get across something that's a little bit more cohesive. The multifamily residential section, like for example, or a category, we've broken that down now into 3 different categories. Medium density residential is broken down into 2 different categories. So anyway, so all this would get kind of an overhaul is basically what this work would be doing with the consultant. Let me go back to my example that I was going to show you. So this is similar to what we would hope for in the end product, something like this for the land use chapter itself. And then this would also, this kind of like, more well thought out design, better visuals, actual like readable and relatable to our community, not just kind of borrowing images from outside. And this is actually kind of almost similar. It's a little smaller than the scope of Spanish Valley, but right now we're just focusing on Spanish Valley as part of this update.
Those are some nice graphics.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
This was actually one of the consultants that put in a bid for the future land use analysis, but we didn't end up choosing them. So yeah, I just think it's a little bit more. I think the visual aids really help. And then just having all the mapping, because we are going to have, we've developed a lot of maps that go along with the future land use plan. And then the streetscapes. So we have this whole other element of our land use plan that should be focusing on what our streets are going to look like in relation to the land uses. So anyway, kind of the idea. Let's see. So we'll go back to the scope of work. So if you have time and you want to read through this and give me some feedback, I mean, at this point, I feel like it's getting close. I have a few little places where I need to fill in the gaps. I'm talking about this section here with the visual elements. I need to, add in some description there about what we would be looking for. The other idea with this would be having them create something that's an online format that you can easily navigate on our website. So there'd be like, each chapter could be a button that you could open up by itself, and it'd be more, there's so many different versions now or ways to communicate a big complicated plan in a more simplified way online.
And would that be included in the scope of
Yeah.
the
Yeah, and
website updates?
Yeah, it's in here kind of towards the end. Yeah, create an online version that is easily accessible. I probably want to expand on that. And I did have this in my budget. So far, it hasn't gotten cut, but we'll see with they're having to make some cuts to the budget apparently, so hopefully this doesn't get in that category. We'll see. But, it is really important to finish this process up. Obviously, we've been working on it for a long time and it's been drawn out. And a lot of our decisions that we make about rezones, I mean, every rezone application is rezone decision is difficult without this plan being in place, you know, and it's just, it's something, it's of high importance. So
Who's the audience for these things?
it's you, the planning commission and the county commission, and obviously the public. Yeah,
Like what kind of?
all of the whole, the community,
So
everybody.
it'd be helpful, for example, if somebody did have a rezoning application, kind of like our future land use map, they would be able to pull from these items and see if these works support their request.
Yeah.
Thing, and that way they would kind of have a little more information to know whether they would want to move forward with the project or not.
Yeah, well, that's what this is. The future land use plan is this. So the future land use plan is a component of the land use
Sorry, I was
chapter.
thinking of the maps.
Yeah, and then the maps, and the maps be part of the document, so in order to, you know, make a rezone decision, you would be referring to our future land use map and this chapter to guide your decisions. And then, yeah, people who are applying for rezones could reference it and say, oh, you know,
Yeah.
I could go this way or that way.
And we
It-
would, we
it
as
just
staff would
seems-
like you to point that out to applicants as they approach
Yeah.
our office to say, hey, what do you think? And we would point them in this direction.
And the website improvements would be big too. That, I thought about Mark's comment about more people engaged and, you know, just a website that's more usable and make things clear actually would kind of lend to that too, wouldn't it?
Right.
I just wonder about like, to me, it seems like. Are you, I guess I have like this perspective, like, oh, I own a place and, oh, I never really like thought about like land use and stuff until I joined this. It's kind of like, oh, well, like, I mean, are you trying to communicate to landowners and potential landowners and real estate agents, like, this is what you could use with this place? Is that kind of like,
Well, I mean, the land use chapter, the future land use plan is a comprehensive, we're taking a comprehensive look at what development could look like in our valley over the next 10 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And with public input, with people that live in the community, we want to get their input on what that should look like, instead of it just being willy-nilly and up to the developers to decide. We have to make some decisions, and so that's what this document is,
Yeah.
it's making those hard decisions, figuring out where the appropriate places are for higher density.
Right.
Where neighborhoods could handle taking in some higher density.
yeah, I see it as a guide for development.
It's a guide for
And,
development.
and so like, I just am like how we have it now is just a bunch of rules and like, it's like, hey,
Right.
here's how we want development to drive in Grant County. I guess I'm just giving
Yeah, no,
kind of my 2 cents. I'm like, oh, how's this like, who are we really, you know, who's this really for,
mhm.
kind of thing.
It's for the planners, but it's for the community, I mean.
Yeah,
it's-
cause I think a lot of people just own property and they have no clue. They're going, oh, yeah, I own a house, or I bought this lot, and maybe I can build a place on it.
Right,
Like, I've seen developers come in here and be like, yeah, we wanna build an extra house, and we're like, dude, you can build like 10. Like,
Mhm.
Well,
Like,
we even
and-
had,
and it's just kind of like, there's a disconnect between like, and I'm like, oh, are we not selling it right? You know, is this like a thing?
to your point, we've had someone come in with an application a few meetings ago who wanted to upzone. And the future land use, it was
Oh, yeah.
near Highway
Kimberly,
Commercial,
yeah.
remember?
Yeah, I
And
was like, you need to think bigger, and, you know.
It probably would have fit in if this was done, that And it did, it would have been an easy decision and we didn't
That's
make
right.
the decision.
It would have
remember?
helped with that.
It's this guidance that we needed to do that.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have all, like, what we've done so far is we've done a lot of public outreach, right? We've had lots of workshops. We'll still have some more of those going forward. Once we get more of a finalized draft of this and there's something to show the public, it would be going back out and, you know, getting their input again. And making any tweaks that we would need to based on what the feedback is from the communities, but like, I guess what I'm trying to convey is we have all these kind of pieces that we've been working on. We have the public workshops, we have the GIS mapping that I've worked extensively on that, you know, shows everything that we've decided where high density could go, where neighborhood mixed use should go maybe. And then we've had all these planning commission work sessions and land use steering committee meetings. So we have a lot of information and mapping and, we just don't have the final kind of coordinated effort, and the consultants would be able to do that. And the architectural kind of renderings and the visual elements that would be helpful to go along with this.
If I could pop in here, I know there's been quite a bit of back and forth from community members about the trade-offs of long-term planning versus spending the money in the moment. And I think what's so critical about this type of effort is it creates more predictability for everybody in the system. It creates more predictability for developers. You know, Jerry, you just mentioned a specific example where there might have been alignment about how something could potentially be a fit, but because we hadn't codified it, it would have been us deviating from the existing plan to approve something. It also helps with consistency for homeowners and landowners who are concerned about changes happening in their community one-off. And, you know, we just heard an applicant for the Planning Commission talk about the importance of citizen input, but not everybody is free to come to these meetings on a Monday night. And, you know, not everybody has that flexibility in that schedule, in their schedule. So creating opportunities to go out and get citizen input in this form, when there's lots of opportunities to hold workshops and town halls and go out into the community, it means that everybody has an opportunity to get their voice heard in shaping how our community should literally look, you know, with various design standards, as well as where different uses make the most sense. And so there's always going to be a trade-off in this type of investment, but this ultimately results in more predictability, more consistency, less waste, and more access in an equitable way for citizens to help influence decision-making. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, if anyone's watching and looking at this price tag, it really is there to make sure that everybody gets a fair shake and an opportunity to participate in the process in a consistent way. So
it is, I was thinking that it is, of course, planners and developers and people on the commission, but it is also citizens who need to understand this plan, have something that's readable and visual. I always think that it's such a nice thing, because you say to yourself, man, I've done 10 pages in only 15 minutes, because it's got pictures and it's set out very nicely. So if you want a lot of if you want a lot of participation by citizens in it, it's a very nice thing. The other people who use the land use code itself are also often citizens who come here and argue, this can't be here and these are the reasons. It's not the right zone for it. It's not the preferred zone for it. We may get some of that even tonight, but I do remember there was something about how many houses you could have at the end of a street that has a turnaround developed on it, that somebody finds in the land use code, comes here and argues you can't put in that development, and they win because they know how to use that land use code. They're just citizens.
Mm-hmm.
This one happened to at one time be on the county commission, so kind of knew the rules, but so it's a valuable guide for many people.
Thank you. Yeah, the other component of the work would be to take the entire general plan, the other chapters, and actually match the format with the chapter 6 land use, which could also mean a lot you know, some staff time to actually kind of go through those chapters as well, like the transportation chapter could use a little bit of updating in order to be consistent with our new transportation master plan that was adopted. And we also have the affordable housing master plan that's getting adopted soon, so that should be consistent with our housing chapter. So those kinds of things we would be looking at, kind of going in and making sure that all the other chapters are kind of up to par with that quality of work that's being done, so. It'll be a lot of work, actually, but I'm hoping that we can get the chapter 6 land use done first. That'll be obviously the priority, and then the other chapters will be kind of after that. Yeah, so think about it. If you have any, you know, ideas of what we should be including in here, something you don't think needs to be included in here, you can send me an email, or we can talk about it at the next meeting. But I know it's a lot to take in right now, and I didn't have it in the packet, so.
From a timing standpoint, I guess you'll have a selection process to go through and then.
Yeah, we have to put this out to bid, and then, you know, I'm hoping that like January, we could be off and running with a kickoff meeting and have the consultants hired by that point.
We were scheduled for what, spring?
Yeah. I know, every time I set that deadline, I kick myself, or that timeline, because it just goes out and out, so, yeah, we were hoping spring,
1 or 2 staff members doing everything.
yeah.
I guess I wonder if you could almost like encourage affordable housing kind of stuff by like being like, hey, this is opportunities in affordable housing, like that's how I see. Like, that's why I asked who your audience is, because it'd be like you can almost encourage certain types of development by being like, hey, like this is development opportunities, or like,
Yeah.
you know, you just have, you know, ordinary citizen dummy of being like, oh, what about my place? Oh, I'm gonna, you know, I could do this with, you know, kind of thing. I think, I guess I'm just trying to put you in the mindset of like ordinary citizen, how they're looking at this and like maybe how we can drive this towards certain things that I think we all think affordable housing is important, and maybe you can use this to sell certain
Right.
policies.
Well, yeah, so that's in the
Yeah,
future land use designations with all the variety of densities that we'd be offering. in the
right.
future, you know.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, if you're gonna have somebody like $80,000 put this, it's like a development guide.
Right,
Almost, you know.
Yeah. it's an incentive, well, there's incentives built
Right.
into that, because there's
Yeah.
that upzone possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, thank you, yeah. The next discussion item, discussion to evaluate and consider an expansion to the alternative dwelling overlay pilot program, Jenna.
Well, let me throw it out there. I'm not sure how you all are comfortable with it. The next 2 discussion items are kind of short and a bit more of internal discussion items.
Good idea.
In respect of everyone's time here for the public hearings, would you maybe want to do our call for citizen comment at this
Yep.
time and then move right into those hearings?
And go into those public hearings, and then, yes,
We'll come back to the
sounds,
other 2.
sounds good to me, so. We're ready for public comments. Again, not on the items that we're having a public hearing, if anybody has a citizen comment. I'm guessing that's no one, and here's what I'm gonna do with these various hearings, as I understand this process. We're gonna do the 2 ones that are on a request for an extension of time separately. They're 2 separate hearings. As I understand the ADO hearings, that where we have 4 other hearings, they're all 1 hearing actually, is the way we do it. And so what we'll do is hear each of the things, hear the applicants, go through each and every one of them, and then at the end of it, make a motion. That motion might say, oh, approve this one, not approve this one. And see how that, and then of course have discussion, close the hearings, have discussion, etc. So, the very first one is public hearing to consider an ordinance. Nope, it is not. Yes, it is. approving the amended development agreement for the alternative dwelling overlay district located at 2850 Highway 191.
Thank you. So I'm first gonna share my screen, just to kind of show you the parcel map and give you an idea of where the property is located, and then I will go right into my staff report. So this is the ADO for Tyson Carroll. And it is in your packet, but just for the record and online, I'm gonna go ahead and just read through the agenda summary staff report. So it is right down on South Highway 191. We'll also give you a visual of his master plan. So go here. Okay. Alright, we're gonna try this a different way. We're gonna stop screen and start again. That's it. Okay, great. Would you also, Mr. Tyson Carroll? No,
Pardon?
Mr. Carroll?
No.
Do we have the applicant here in the room at all or online? Just for my information, okay. So on May 3rd, the Grand County General Commission this alternative dwelling overlay zoning district for the parcel located at 2850 Highway 191. Once an applicant receives approval of the ADO, the next step in the application process is to require the submission and approval of a site plan review application. Land use code does lay out a timeline for that to happen and includes deadlines to receive the site plan approval and then as well subsequent certificate of occupancy for that. The commission had originally included these deadlines in the ADO ordinance for the purpose of ensuring that ADO dwelling units were developed in a timely manner. The section on the lapse of approval of those approvals is Land Use Code 4.9.6G, and it states that the ADO district approval should automatically expire and be void unless a site plan is approved for the development within 6 months of that approval. And then if certificate of occupancy is not issued within 2 years of that district approval. It also allows for an extension of up to 6 months, which can be granted upon the written request from the applicant and approval from County Commission of an amended development agreement. So at this time, the applicant doesn't have a site plan approval. They have submitted a site plan application and review of that is currently in process. So this applicant is now requesting approval of the amended development agreement, which would add the additional 6 months to obtain a site plan approval and then as well an additional 6 months to that certificate of occupancy deadline. So the new deadlines would be May 3rd of 2024 for the site plan approval and November 3rd, 2025 for the certificates of occupancy respectively. The applicant request describes the challenges in meeting the application deadline and site plan approval based on unique circumstances with the location of the lot. The property is located on Highway 191, and as such, the land use code requires the approval of a highway occupancy permit. In order to obtain the highway occupancy permit, UDOT is required that the applicant in this case conduct a traffic impact study as well as submit a drainage report prior to the issuance of that permit. The drainage report is required due to the site's location downstream of a larger offsite drainage basin, which conveys runoff through the site along the north property line. The design of the offsite drainage is currently being coordinated with the neighboring property to the north and the county engineer. While the applicant's engineer believes the drainage challenges are solvable, of course, they do need some additional time. Staff recommends a neutral approval of this. It is a development agreement, so our recommendations are typically neutral on those items. And in your packet, it did include the applicant's narrative as well. Essentially, it's just challenges with obtaining the highway occupancy during that time period. So you can't begin to obtain those approvals until you received the ADO approval and then had that recorded. So that obviously delays the process. I see that Emily had a question. Is that a particular
No
question?
question. I'm just letting you know, I need to move to my phone. Steve is joining in just a minute to meet quorum while we wait for Tony, and I will be here until that happens. So.
Okay, that was the end of my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions for anyone about the application or the request for that. Really, it's just a question of timing and allowing some additional time to get that HOP permit.
Any questions? Is the applicant online? Because if the applicant is online and they want to say something, now is an opportunity.
I think the person online is a different applicant for item number 4.
Okay. I'm going to close this public hearing then and look for a motion.
Were you going to do it all at the end or for each one?
For these first two, since they're only requests for extension, but the new ones altogether.
Gotcha. In that case, I move that we recommend approval of the extension. As written in the packet.
I'll second.
And do we have any discussion?
No comment.
How many are in favor of the extension? So that's unanimous.
And it looks
So-
like Steve just joined online, OB, just so you know. So I'll just to give you a
This
heads
is
up.
Steve, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I'm not up to date where we're at with the meeting though. So if you're voting on something, I'll just abstain here and get caught up.
It's perfect, Steve, because we're just going on to a new thing, and I think Emily's gonna drop off, and we still have a quorum. This is
Thanks
great.
all. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Okay, so we're gonna open a public hearing again. This public hearing is to consider ordinance approving the amended development agreement for the alternative dwelling overlay district located at West 400 North 1089 Naptech Expeditions. And Jenna has a report for us.
Thank you. I mean, if you like, in the meantime, you could probably sit right up at the end while I give my staff report.
Sure.
Our applicants, is here tonight. This is Brian Martinez.
Hello. Hi there.
You get your master plan up on the board for everyone. So a similar staff report to that, but just to, excuse me, to the last one, but just to make sure that it's in the record and online for anyone listening. I'll go ahead and give a quick read of that as well. This is a request for an amended development agreement for the NAVTAC the NAVTEC ADO application. Same as the last application on May 3rd. This was during the first round of ADO applications. On May 3rd, Green County Commission approved the alternative dwelling overlay for the subject parcel. Again, once an applicant receives that approval, they have to move on to the site plan application, which requires review and approval of our development review team application process. The timeline for that application review process is 6 months from the district approval. And then additionally, 2 years to have all the infrastructure that's required for that ADO to be developed out such that those have certificate of occupancy for that. There is an excerpt in the land use code that allows for an extension of that of 6 months for both the site plan approval as well as certificate of occupancy, and that occurs with written request by the applicant and then subsequent review and approval by planning commission and county commission at public hearings. And that's done with an amended development agreement where we amend the lapse of approval timeline within that document. The applicant is requesting approval of that, allowing for 6 months based on several hurdles in meeting that deadline for site plan approval. mainly being illness. The owner of record for the property was unable to travel. They had some significant illness, and in order for the applicant to move forward with the site plan application, you have to have the district approval recorded in the recorder's office. So there was some significant delay there. The approving documents were actually recorded on September 12th. As you can see, it's only now November 13th, so there hasn't been much time there for Brian to get those items together. It does require hiring a contractor, developing those plans, submitting, and then subsequent review by our department. So due to that significant delay, the applicant has requested in writing that extension. And again, the staff recommendation would be neutral because it's an amended development agreement. And I can answer any questions there, or if you'd like to direct them to the applicant, Brian.
Any questions? You want to say anything? You can if you want.
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
If you guys have any questions?
Okay, and anybody else?
No question.
Okay. I'm gonna close the public hearing and ask for a motion and then a discussion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the extension as per the language in the document.
I'll second that. Okay, approve. A motion and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
There he is.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Aye, sorry, my hand's blurred, but aye.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, we're gonna go into a long public hearing that has items 8, 9, and 10 and 11. So I guess I will read each of these things as Jenna does them, but they're all going to be as part of one public hearing. Public hearing to consider and solicit oral and written comments on a request to rezone parcel number 02-0021-0134 to 812 Spanish Valley Drive, Moab, Utah, to designate the alternative dwelling overlay district.
Thank you. Again, I'm just gonna give you a visual here of our parcel map to kind of give you an idea of where the subject lot lies. It's right along the corridor of Spanish Trail Road and Spanish Valley, right on the corner there. And then I will turn it over to the master plan while I go through the staff report for you. So as Obi mentioned, the property is located at 2812 Spanish Valley Drive. The ADO proposes 4 full hookup RV sites situated on 1.01 acres. Comes along with a community garden and additional guest parking. The existing structure on the property is the owner's residence. The subject lot is located at the corner of Spanish Valley Drive and Spanish Trail, and it's located within an RR zoning district. It's bound on 2 sides by 2 property lines by rural residential as well, and then the zoning district across Spanish Trail Road is large lot residential. The intersection right there at Spanish Valley and Spanish Trail is identified in the 2012 general plan as a rural center. Additionally, public workshops and land use steering committee meetings for the 2030 general plan future land use map continue to identify this corridor as an emerging node, likely for mixed commercial use and potential increased residential zoning to support those uses. While located in a rural residential zoning district, not a preferred zoning district, the corner property is located on a major collector road, and it's identified in the UTMP and essentially located having direct access to the Spanish Trail Road, which is planned for the future shared use path. And such development would provide multimodal access for the residents, which is preferred by the ADO zoning district. Because the development is bordered on the south and the west by a protected zone district, the required buffering would be needed by visual screening through the use of opaque fences, vegetated buffers, or a combination of those. Each of the sites, as you'll see, are 20 by 30, so it meets the required 600 square foot dwelling sites. And the additional parking is also included as well, that isn't required, so there's some additional parking there. There was some conversation about the drainage and flood in the rear of the property. The applicant has submitted a flood exhibit in advance of it being needed. That's not needed until site plan, but that was submitted just to verify that any of those dwelling units would be out of any hazard area. So that has been submitted and good as well. As far as consistency with the general plan, it does meet core value 5 by proposing 4 alternative dwelling sites for residents and helps reinforce a livable community. Helps to maintain the livable community in which future generations are nurtured, vulnerable populations are supported, and health and safety of residents is reinforced. And of course, in the staff report, I go through an evaluation of all the development standards that are required. It goes over lot coverage, site size, buffering requirements, and everything with the application is met. We go through all of that before we get to the public hearing, so that's all set. In regards to consideration for approval of or denial, the application was considered during an ITA process with County Commission and was viewed as a best fit and a favorable application to move forward. And then, of course, the applicability section in which you would evaluate each application is 4.9.2 in regards to preferred zoning districts, compatibility with existing community character, historic use, traffic impact, commute time, water resources, and then overall design of the development. So that is just a brief of that particular application. Obi, would you like me to just kind of go through each of them, and then if we have questions, or do you want to address any questions individually?
Why don't we ask our questions now, because I'll forget my questions by the end. Now, rural residential is not preferred, is that
That's
right?
correct.
That's correct. And can you tell us a little bit about rural centers, what they are envisioned to be? Or do you-
Sure, yeah, a rural center in the 2012 general plan is supposed to be a mixed commercial and residential node that has quite a large range. In the document, it says anywhere between 5 and 30 acres. So there's a couple of those identified on the future land use map for that. One of them is right there at the corner where Miss Sorg's application is. There's another up in Thompson. I think there's one a little bit more south as well. So these are intended to be commercial and increased residential nodes, and that has been identified from 2012 and likely through our next future land use map as well.
Any other questions?
Just one for clarification on this. We have 4 sites that are shown there. But if you look at the last sentence on the lower right, it says the development will include 7 4-built or pre-manufactured tiny homes. Is that apparently is a typo?
And maybe 7 includes 7 4 though. Yeah, I'm sure it's just a typo. I can make sure that we have that.
Yeah,
Fixed
it's
up
a typo,
before.
sorry, I
Yeah.
got this.
Okay.
I'm still waiting for my glasses.
And just for clarification, the intent is to build for tiny homes not on permanent foundations, so we can comply
So
with
we-
future land use.
Yes, so if needed, we could remove them and, yeah,
Which may
comply
address,
with future land use.
yes, okay, very interesting. That addresses one of my sort of questions by asking what this rural center would might look like. You might or might not want to move these.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then maybe we should do it exactly this way. We can go through each of them, and do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
In
No,
regards
just
to.
Clarification, there'll be the tiny homes. We have it listed already.
I'm so sorry, but the owl and anyone online won't catch you. Can you pop up here?
Oh, yes, and maybe name. too.
So my name's Scott Palmer, I'm Sarah Source partner,
Yes.
she's the landowner, but
And could we get names so that this can get in the minutes? I'm sorry.
yeah, Scott Palmer and Sarah Source for 2812 Spanish Valley Drive. And on our application, it says we're doing RV sites, but they're not gonna be like your standard RV, we're gonna build proper wood framed tiny homes that'll be 300 square feet with a 6-foot deck at the end of each one of them. We just don't have that on this, at this phase yet. And then the idea is that with that future land use plan, that we can remove them if that was to be zoned resident or commercial at some point.
Very good. Any other questions? Good. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next one, but not a new hearing. To consider and solicit oral and written comments on a request to rezone parcel number 02-0021-0127, which is at 2810 Spanish Valley Drive in Moab, Utah, to designate the alternative dwelling overlay district.
Sure. And I think I saw Nathan, which he said online, he is the applicant for this ADO. And you saw where Sarah's property is there. Nathan's application is actually just to the south of that, so they're right in the same location there. There is a visual of the master plan. So I'll read through for you. Yeah, this applicant proposes 4 ADO dwelling sites on 1.04 acres. The property is located right at the applicant's primary dwelling, and also one additional existing ADU is at the rear of the property. The proposed ADU units are designed behind the primary dwelling unit at the rear of the property, providing privacy for the residents. The subject lot, like the other, is located in a rural residential zoning district, and again, while not a preferred zoning district, it would also be located along the Spanish Valley Drive future shared use path and provide multimodal access for any of those residents. Like the last application as well, the Spanish Trail Road and Spanish Valley Drive intersection is identified in the 2012 future land use map as a commercial node, and that's likely to continue through the 2030 general plan as that continues to be an emerging center there. Because the development is bordered on all sides by a protected zone district of RR, it would be required to provide visual buffers for the protected zone district properties to each of those sides. Each dwelling site is proposed to have full sewer, water, and electrical hookups, and will have access to a future planned community garden and shade structure. Additionally, like the last applicant, actually, let me share and show the visual of the drainage map. And in fact, it will be a combination of requirement from the engineer as well as the FEMA floodplain administrator, what would be required to be demonstrated during the site plan application. So for this element, nothing is required to be submitted. It's just kind of an FYI of where those ADOs are located in conjunction with that drainage. So there's that visual for you. So again, measuring 20 by 30, each of the 4 dwelling sites does meet the required 600 square foot minimum, and a communal parking lot for a couple of the sites as well as individual for the others. The application proposes a 20-foot internal driveway that provides direct access to each of the units and also provides emergency hammerhead turnaround style. The applicant would be talking with the fire chief as well as the road supervisor just to make sure that that meets the proper specifications for that. And the applicant does have those specifications already, which, and the fire chief said there should be no problem at all to fit that in there. 2 existing storage structures that you may have seen on a Google air map visual would be removed for providing the location for the future planned drive access. As required, the driveway would be properly drained and have a durable dust-free surface, compacted road base or asphalt. And then again, skipping down to the evaluation in the staff report of all the development standards. We worked through that during the application process, and anything in regards to lot coverage, setbacks, parking, and all of those are evaluated during that application process, and everything is included and complies here. Again, like the last application and all of ours coming next, the considerations for applicability and approval or denial would be the fact that the application was heard at County Commission during an intent to apply workshop and given the go-ahead to move forward and seen as a best fit application. And again, all of these are evaluated against commute time, traffic, overall development, preferred zoning district, and their location on a major drive access. So that pretty much covers it for my staff report if you need any clarifying questions on this application.
I have a question about parking. So, I mean, they look like they're different sizes. And so my question is really, how many parking spaces do those equal?
That's funny that you asked that, because I had this discussion with Mr. Patusit, and, you know, with these applications of master plan, if you don't have the most amazing software, you're just kind of drawing it in there. So those are required to have one parking site for each, and the typical standard is 9 by 18. So those will be verified at site plan.
Okay.
They'll have to be measured out and scaled. But if I'm remembering correctly, there's 2 in the parking stall, like number 1. And I think, so they vary in size, but all the required parking spaces are there.
Are there?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, some of them look like they might be parking lots.
a little
but-
bit. I wasn't sure myself.
And any other questions of staff? And Tony, where we are is in this. Thank you. We're doing the 4, oh boy, where are they? They're number 8, 9, and 11, and they are on the new ADOs. And we're gonna vote on all of them together as one public hearing.
How many does this get us toward the 300 quota?
There's 150.
There's 150 total, and of course I do have that number in front of me. 114 during the first 2 rounds, and this set is an additional 20, so I think we're at 134. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Bertucci is online if you.
Yes, let me, so,
Well, is this also in the commercial node for the future land
The
use?
same thing, it
Yeah.
is, yeah.
it's right close to that.
Okay.
Intersection. And the applicant, if the applicant wants to say anything, or if we have any questions for the applicant, you're certainly welcome to say anything you want to about the application.
Hello. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to say that's not on the master plan, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
I got a question, just an interest. Did you want 4 spaces there, or if you had the opportunity to have less, would you have chosen that? I meant to ask the other people that too.
I'm not sure. I have to put some thought into that.
I just wondered, because on our future things,
Yeah.
we're decreasing that limit, and I just wondered if that. Anyways, I also, are you familiar with this property is on our radar on the future land use plan as a potential commercial, you know, there's some commercial elements there. So, does that fit, like the other previous applicants seem like they have some plans for that? Do you have anything like that? Are you kind of aware of those kind of things?
Well, I'm aware that they might be doing commercial activity across the street, but can you clarify exactly what you mean by like this property?
Yeah, so, yeah, we're coming up with like the future land use plan. And that's just in an area that we've determined that as the county grows, that this area has more of like, you know, it's at a spot that, you know, has traffic patterns that would be conducive to kind of like more of a commercial vibe to it.
And
Yeah.
increase usage with it.
Yeah, and so it's just, I just was curious at where you're at with that kind of. Are you just planning keeping it like this, or were you kind of have a future plan? I'm just curious on where you're at with it. Or you just don't know. That's fine too. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you mean like a future plan in terms of trying to rezone it to commercial, or I don't fully understand your question.
Okay, sorry, yeah. What am I getting at? I just was curious if you were aware of kind of the movements behind this
Oh.
kind of.
Yeah, definitely. I know the plans to add the bike path, which I think would be great, and then also, you know, the plans of possibly expanding commercial activity across the street, which I'm also in support of. So yeah, in terms of what we would do long term, if we possibly submit for a rezone, I'm not really sure. But yeah, when this program popped up, it seemed like a perfect fit for the space that we have on this property, and so we decided to apply.
Okay.
Could you put up the map one more time about the location of the lot? Just so I gotta remember.
And these are, each individual one has its own sewer and water, right? This is one of these.
Yeah,
No,
it's
okay.
got all full connection.
There's a lot. Zooming out a little bit, you can see the gas station, going out to Highway 191 there.
Yeah, and okay,
Yeah, this one is just off the corner.
yeah,
Yep,
it's
the
off,
last
it's
one
off
was
the
right
corner.
on the corner on the
Yeah.
south side of Berlin.
It's kind of funny having two ADOs together, you know, it's
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. To me,
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I'm just like, oh, can we? You know, in the future, thinking about how we do these things,
No. We have any other questions
this kind of is.
or comments? Okay, so I'm going to close this. No, I'm not gonna close the public hearing. I'm going on to the next applicant. To consider and, to consider and solicit oral written comments on a request to rezone parcel number 02-0008-0089 located at 1441 Spanish Valley Drive, Moab, Utah, to designate the alternative dwelling overlay district.
Okay, so again, you see a little overview of where the property is located, in conjunction to Mill Creek intersection at Spanish Valley Drive. A vision of where it is. And then focus on the master plan and read your staff reports. The application proposes 4 ADO sites situated at the rear of the property. The drive access consists of a hammerhead style turnaround that is designed to provide emergency access to each of the units and would be improved with a durable dust-free surface properly drained. Each dwelling site and associated parking space would also be improved with that same required treatment. The 1.03 acre property is located at 1441 Spanish Valley Drive and is located within an LLR zoning district. It's bound by the Hunt Creek subdivision in the north and other single-family large lot residential property to the east and the west, and then a small patch of general commercial across the street. Each site is designed with full sewer, water, and electrical hookups, installation of which would require approval and permitting through GWSFA and the building department. 25% lot coverage is permitted on the lot for the LLR zoning district, as measured by the existing structures on the lot and square footage of the proposed dwelling sites. The total coverage for the lot is estimated at 13% and well under the permitted maximum. Landscaping on the property, like the others, includes 1 drought-resistant native tree or shrub per dwelling site. And compatibility standards would require that visual screening is going to be located on all property boundaries as it abuts other lots in the protected LLR zoning district. I could have quite a short staff report on this particular element. Like the others, it is meeting the core number 5 value from the general plan of 2030 and maintains a livable community in which future generations are nurtured, valued, and populations are supported by providing 4 additional alternative dwelling overlay sites for local residents. The application was again evaluated for all the development standards, and with a couple tweaks of the application, everything was met and is nice and clear on the master plan. Again, this application was evaluated at the commission meeting during the intent to apply period and was given the thumbs up and a best fit to move forward with the full rezone application. That is all I have for Mr. O'Neill.
Any questions of staff?
And then our applicant,
And the
Mr.
applicant.
Kennedy, is here as well.
Are here, and if you could, yeah, why don't you go ahead and identify yourself?
Kevin, you want to-
Or, yeah,
Yeah, my name is Kevin O'Neill, and this is my proposed RV spots. And I had rental places in the past, I know how to deal with tenants and stuff, and I would like to put in 4 spots to accommodate local employees or workers, you know. And I recently lived in my RV for 2.5 years. And it's, it's kind of a hardship and then, living in a park and I figured with, 4 spots and I'm gonna have that whole half acres designated for them. So they'll have a good space for them, to have their room and everything comfortably. And there was, in Spanish Valley being close to town and everything, I think would be an asset for it. And I don't have any future plans for it. I live there and I plan on staying there. So.
We take a discussion or?
Yeah, just if you have questions.
I just think this is one of these examples where the surrounding area has a lot of, like, when we were designing this, has a lot of examples of like. People doing this already and just trying to legalize it, I think this is a perfect example of that.
Well, I don't. I'm Joe Dowd.
Oh, this is a comment. Good.
Is this? the
And
time for public
I've lived there.
Hold it, yeah, you can
Yes.
comment now
Okay.
on this, yes. So this is a comment on this particular project. Yeah, I think it's good now.
Okay, well, I've lived where I live for 45 years and I've lived in Moab for 68 years. So a lot of the neighbors around that area do not want to get camp parks started right in their backyard. And if it just, where do you stop that? I mean, I own 7 acres, so I'm not gonna have a camp park put in my yard or around me, but a lot of those neighbors don't have any choice. Everybody that's in Hunt Creek, he's backing up right to their houses. So do they need to come and talk to you people?
Your name is?
Joe Dowd.
Yeah, just so you can get it. Anybody with a question?
Can I make a comment for Mr.
Sure,
Jim?
absolutely.
Actually, there are a couple of times you can speak. You're here today. There will be another public hearing for county commission on. I can follow up with
December.
you on that. Yeah, thank you. And additionally, we're gonna start looking at and taking the temperature of whether or not we want to expand the ADO program. And that might also be another opportunity for you to come speak at both of those public hearings. We will have one here if you watch the agenda for that item, and then we would also have one at county commission. To your question about when does that end, this being a pilot program, there was only 150 units permitted during this time period of 1 year. So that's another time for you to put in your comments on whether you think it should be expanded, the program, or any limitations to that you think might be helpful. So you can contact our office and I can follow up with you about other times that you.
Okay,
put those
what's your name?
Jenna Gorney.
Jen.
And can you tell me where you would be in relationship to that map, where your property is? I'm just curious.
Yes, it would be,
Oh, he's got it up there now.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's right underneath all your words there. If you go. Close those out. And then,
North.
yeah, it's the one that kind of looks like crazy Texas up there. The big piece of property. that-
The one kind of on the upper right corner of that cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
The one that's 7 acres.
Yeah.
there's 4 lots that are ours. That's my main one. And then I own one up where they're just triangles. And then both my sons own property right there.
And the one, and I'm having trouble with this, with the one that's being developed is?
The one that's in blue.
Right here.
Right there.
That one right there, got it,
Yeah.
there it's in blue, yes.
Well, there's multiple spots with tiny homes on Spanish Valley already there.
But it's commercial.
Yeah.
That's all zoned commercial. You bought that knowing that it was zoned residential.
You should probably direct your comments to me or somebody
Oh,
else.
I'm sorry.
You know how that goes right now. Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments, anybody else wants to make a comment on this project?
I just want to second his, I live right adjacent to it as well. And
Could we get your name also?
State your name, please, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Dowd Jr.
Okay.
and I am adjacent to that a little bit closer. And I'm the same way, just like you mentioned, this is what a lot of people are doing and they're just trying to make it legal. I would just like to not have it legal and not have people doing it illegal either.
I mean, that's why you have rules. And we should follow the rules. That's why it's zoned the way it's zoned, and it's been zoned that way since I've been there. And everybody seemed to be fine. So he just barely bought this property just a few months ago.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
We are moving to the next one, if I can get time, but here it is. To consider and solicit oral and written comments on a request to rezone parcel number 02-0007-0168 at 1379 South Arnell Lane, Moab, Utah, to designate the alternative dwelling overlay district.
Again, this is an aerial view. We're right down the road from Kevin's application there, near the corner of Mill Creek and Spanish Valley Drive. So that's the location you can see there. Holyoke Lane, we may make reference to this later, but here's Holyoke Lane. And it has an access easement down to the south there. So we'll come back to that, but now that you have a visual of where it's located. I'm going to zoom in quite a bit so you can kind of see the detail here as I'm reading through the application. This ADO is proposing 8 alternative dwelling sites, again with full sewer, water, and electrical hookups situated on the preferred circular internal access. The 1.2 acre property is zoned rural residential and is currently the location of the applicant's primary dwelling and fronts on South Arnell Lane, south of Holyoke Lane. Property is bound on the west by several other properties also zoned rural residential, but this property is unique in its location in that it sits in a small pocket of parcels zoned for 1 acre lots while being surrounded on 3 sides by property zoned highway commercial. A high level look at that. A high level look at the vicinity map highlights this unique zoning and could support the idea that this pocket of low density residential could be viewed as a good location for future increased residential density. While rural residential zoning district is not a preferred zoning district developed for the ADO development, many public workshops and land use steering committee meetings have identified this area, the Mill Creek Drive corridor from Highway 191 and Murphy Lane, as an emerging node that could possibly support mixed commercial uses and increased residential density based on its proximity to the university campus. As designed, the development it adheres to the required rural residential setbacks. And as encouraged per the land use code, additional open space on the property is included and defined as shared green space and community shared lawn and garden. Because the development is immediately bordered by other properties zoned rural residential, a protected zone district, the required screening will be required at the site plan application, which would include a 6-foot site obscuring fence or a combination of vegetated berms, landscape and buffering. The plans also include a native tree, shrub, or planting for each proposed dwelling site and additional parking space for each dwelling site beyond the singular space required. While not located along the future land use shared use path, along Spanish Valley Drive, the intersection of Spanish Valley Drive and Mill Creek Drive, where the multimodal path would begin, is roughly 1,200 feet away. Overall, the location of the development provides quick access to Highway 191 as well as the city center via Mill Creek Drive. While not on an arterial or collector road per the UTMP, it is as preferred by the UTMP, by the ADO ordinance. Mill Creek Drive is also located less than 1,000 feet away by way of Holyoke Lane and to Mill Creek Drive. Access to the subject lot, which is an element that's been spoke about quite a bit, consists of an easement defined in the title. While 8 additional dwelling units accessing the property via an easement isn't ideal, the applicant has agreed that if the rezone were approved, they would enter into a maintenance agreement with the adjacent property owners, which would address the long-term maintenance of such easement over time as related to surface treatment, dust mitigation, and associated costs of the above. In addition, the applicant has agreed to submit a county attorney approved development agreement that 1, clarifies access to the subject lot as related to the location of the required location and required width of the access easement. And 2, references that maintenance agreement between the applicant and adjacent property owners. Due to timing constraints of the ADO application process, final details of the above would be determined if the rezone were approved. The applicant has also submitted a notarized affidavit signed by the affected property owners that aims to provide assurance to the commissions that the property owners with rights to that easement are informed of the scope of the ADO project, the density it would add to the lot, and access as also describes that if approved, the applicant has plans for maintenance of such easement. It also may be worth noting that the applicant may not begin a site plan review application process until the proposed maintenance agreement, master plan, and development agreement are recorded. The ADO ordinance allows only 6 months from the time of district approval to obtain that site plan approval from the planning department. That delay in finalizing the development agreement, maintenance agreement may precipitate the need for an extension request as heard today, and an amended development agreement in accordance with the land use code section on lapse of approval. Again, with this application, like all others, we evaluate the site plan in regards to the development stipulations, setback, lot coverage, and everything was met there without issue. Again, this application was considered during the ITA process and given the thumbs up to move forward. So we are here today.
Because it came late, I just want to like blanket statement. 6 of these, all of them passed the initial sums up in front of the county, all of them checked all the boxes, right?
All of them did,
Okay.
yeah.
And there were
There were
four of them.
4. I think you're thinking
The
of
first,
the
the
ADO
first, the first
standards.
2 are, they look like they're part of it, but those were for asking for extensions of time.
Oh, sure.
And they were
already.
they were approved. I have a question. It's our attorney, our county attorney, that says this is pretty binding on the road that goes in. Is that
It will be
true?
final approval of the county attorney together with the applicant's attorney.
Good.
They'll hash out the details of that. And of course, site plan approval won't be granted until everything is in stone and everyone's comfortable with that.
I'm confident in our attorney. Good. Any other questions of staff?
Just pulling on a thread.
Okay.
State your name for the record.
Mike McCurdy,
This is our applicant.
applicant,
He's our
1879.
Mike McCurdy.
Yeah.
That easement that you're getting with the adjacent private landowner for street access. How long a term of that easement are you contemplating? 30-year, 99-year? Is it gonna be prescriptive and perpetual like? Just curious.
Yeah, I haven't actually thought of that. I would suspect it would be leaning towards a 99-year lease or perpetual. As the neighboring question, Jim, we haven't gone over that in talking, but we would only assume.
I don't know the other parties involved. I just wanted to make sure that it was on our minds that, you know, a 30-year easement on someone who may be living there longer than that. Properties change. I don't know how Jim's lot is zoned. Just preservation of access is a specialty.
And in helpful with the potential rezoning, again, like other applicants, they are to not be put on foundations. They will be tiny homes, but they are able to
modularize.
Yeah.
I think it may be helpful to know, we did talk to the applicant about potentially having some of these documents secured up front, like a templated maintenance agreement or such, but I think everyone believed it would be best to make sure that we do have attorney input on that, and until the rezone is approved, we didn't really think it was beneficial for the applicant to spend money on those kind of things until we know.
Yeah, in that sense, we all know those costs get put on me and then the future renter, and we're trying to keep that to a minimum, in all honesty.
We do have the county engineer working pretty closely with us and the applicant on making sure that those easements are accurate, and then the maintenance for those items within the agreement are nice and tight. So we have a couple people working on it to make sure that whatever we choose would be doable for all.
And in this, I'm hoping in the future,
to input on this, working through this together, so I don't think I'm alone here.
Any other questions for the applicant? You, if you want to say anything in general, you can, you don't have to.
If anyone has any questions, please,
Is
feel
this
free
your
to ask.
second ADO or is this your first?
This is,
You didn't have another one, did you?
I
Or-
owned city property,
Yeah.
previous to this, I did do an ADU,
Okay.
564 square foot
Okay.
ADU, but, hard times, went and lived in an or a legal ADU property. Found that there was an extreme need for the ADO overlay, and ADO units, as I lived in one. I have the chance to do that, and I'm surrounded by this current, property, over a year and a half, almost approaching 2 years of ownership. We have a lot of, at the end of the street, there's a camp park, overlay. Just behind me, there's a future applicant. I think, to the side of me is, another applicant, all across the board, the neighborhoods across the board here. I'm trying to help. And I definitely wouldn't have done this, without neighborhood buy-in. That was my first and foremost question.
Good. Thank you very much. So I'm going to close this public hearing and ask for a motion from someone.
Obi, can I chime in here just real quick? I want I'd love it to go onto the record that, and I'm not sure exactly how we'll vote on this, but since I missed the beginning portion of the meeting, I want to state it now that I will be recusing myself from the McCurdy application, as my wife's company is doing I don't know, she's somehow involved. I don't know what she's doing, but so I'll recuse myself from anything with the McCurdy application.
It, of course, is that I hear you saying that it is the interesting thing that I think through the county commission, it's supposed to be a single public hearing, and the question is, we can obviously say, well, one thing doesn't pass and three things do as a motion. I don't know if it means you have to recuse from the whole thing. It's an interesting question. Let's see where we end up, that's that. Is it a single public hearing with a single vote? The vote, of course, could pass some and not pass others.
Well, from what I've seen in county commission, there seems to always be a general consensus about one or a couple definite yeses.
Mhm.
And then the ones that are not quite sure about, they're kind of held off to the side and then individually determined. I don't know if that's helpful.
I would also point out in the agenda that we've been given here, we have not been given a draft motion in this copy. Yep. So I can probably just wing it.
Okay.
And split it up the way we need to. Yeah.
Yep.
So let me get this right. Lots ending in 2850 Highway 191 and North 1089 Navtech Expeditions. Those are for an extension.
Correct.
So let's do one motion for the extension.
Oh, the extensions have already gotten passed.
They're on the thing.
Well,
The
so
thing
what's
listed the-
what's odd is, it is very odd. What is, the very first two were the extensions, and I think that what the county commission said is you have a single hearing for new ADOs. When you get 4 of them all together, so 8, 9, and 10, 8, 9, 10, 11 are new ADO applications, so that. they
Those
should
6
be-
and 7 should just not be on this list.
And 6 and 7 are earlier public hearings that we had just before you got here. And they were already approved ADOs that needed an another 6 months to fulfill their obligation.
So we still need a motion on those.
So we-
to
so-
recommend the-
So those two have already been
Why are they
heard.
there
and-
then?
So it may be helpful to know the software that you work with when you're inputting items into the agenda, there's simply a category for public hearings. So you,
yeah.
whatever public hearings you have. they
So we-
It's a
so-
computer issue.
It is. So basically, we've had public hearings on 6 and 7 and voted,
Okay,
and they were separate
Okay.
public hearings. And now we've got these, I don't know if you, yeah, you've got it 8, 9, 10, and
that was
11.
a crux piece
are-
of data there. We've already voted on 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Was all I needed
Yeah.
to hear.
Okay,
Voted.
You voted yes.
so now your motion might be
Yeah, okay.
easier.
All right, we'll do the next 3 then, Steve, and vote on the last one. Separate from you. How's that sound? I would like to move to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission to approve the ADO applications for lot numbers ending in 0134, 0127, and 0089 as listed as public hearing items number 8, 9, and 10 respectively in the agenda for what's happening here for the November 13th, 2023 meeting.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Thanks, Steve.
And discussion?
Now, in the past, we've listed the reasons, how they fit in. Is that no longer?
It's probably good for the motion maker to say that, and then other people add anything.
Yeah, namely we still have not, after these 4, reached 150. We still have 16 left to go to fill out the program. So I am motivated to maximize those units before we can contemplate extending the number, right? Secondly, all of these have been in front of the county commission already, have been given a green light. And all of these 3 have checked all of the procedural boxes regarding the technical specifications, the plants, the paving, the parking, and those sorts of things. So at this point, it just feels very procedural to me.
I would agree with that. I think the only thing that I would add is just to call out that a couple of the lots are zoned rural residential, which is not explicitly listed as one of the zonings that we prefer for this ADO. My input when I look at those parcels and their location and their size, I'm not saying that they're erroneously zoned. They are zoned what they're zoned, but given the nature of change in our area, to me, they don't fit, what I would perceive as rural residential. And so the location and the zoning, to me, it seems like it'd be a good fit for these ADOs. I will mention one hesitancy I have, particularly with what are listed as 8 and 9, the ones on like Spanish Trail, Spanish Valley. I mean, I think they're really great. My only concern is knowing that we are looking at potentially rezoning or providing that option for folks to upzone to some sort of commercial. When we put residential in there and we look at what, the price tag associated with that lot, if it were to evolve into something more commercially based, it's just going to increase that price, which is going to make, whatever that future use is, if it were to be something more commercialized, that much more expensive. And, I think kind of a consequence of that is, well, what sort of business would then be able to develop that land? And it's probably going to be one with deeper pockets rather than a smaller business, which is, what I tend to be in favor of. However, that being said, our more pressing issue is housing for locals. So I think that takes precedence over future ideas or plans of potential economic diversification.
I'm gonna jump in, I think, just a touch. It may be helpful to, in those comments, make reference to the applicability section, A through G, the items to consider when approving or denying an ADO district. I captured a few in regards to compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, and it might be helpful to directly reference those.
Okay, for clarification, what I was saying is item A with the ADO developments are preferred in the following zoning districts. And rural residential isn't listed in that. However, well, I won't repeat myself. If we're good there.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I'd say on the density issue on some of the rural residential, it's like we have a unit. Let's say you have a house. Now we've already determined you can do an internal ADU and an external ADU. So that's 3 units on one place. So adding 4 spots, it's kind of like we're only giving like 1 unit of density more. I'm just not seeing it as a big step from what's already like use by right. Right, that's how I'm seeing some of this as well. And I thought it was interesting, you know, we've got plans on the first one there, number 8, to like, oh, they are aware of how to, you know, potentially transform this into the future. And I think, you know, kind of the magic of these things are, I hope they turn profitable, and if that, let's say the land could be bumped up to commercial, it would have already paid for itself, and it's like not that big of a leap to be like, oh, I've got, you know, thousands invested, it's not paid yet for. It's like hopefully the cost of building these is low enough to, you know, not hinder future development for it.
Any other comments? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor of approving these first 3 lots here. Okay, now we're down to number 11. We have a motion on that particular request for a dwelling overlay district.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I can't have all the fun, Jack.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve item number 11, parcel number 168, as shown today, to designate the ADO.
Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
And discussion. Any justifications here?
I think Mike makes a good point. There's already several of them around him already. You know, on the corner of Holyoke and Spanish Valley or Mill Creek. And I would also say that it conforms to, or it, you know, with the future land use, that it puzzle pieces in with that as well. Its location, you know, next to the arterial, we're kind of pushing, like I've noticed on our other stuff saying that we want these to be on only arterial drives. I don't know, it seems like having a written easement with the neighbor shows some kind of good faith in the use of driveways, so I hope that's a indication of how the neighbors feel about it as well.
Any other comments? Okay, we're ready to vote. All in favor. And, oh yeah, Steve is dropping out of this one, so that's unanimous with Steve not voting. Okay. 2 more items. Here, I think there are. Okay, and that is, well, actually, we're very funny. We moved around a little bit so we could get the people with the public hearing. So we have items 3 and 4 to discuss. A discussion to evaluate and consider an expansion to the alternative dwelling overlay pilot program. Gianna is up again.
Thank you. So with this item, I don't think we necessarily need to go into too much detail with it today. Really, my goal today was just kind of to get a vibe from the commission if I should begin working on that amendment or if it's something we are or are not interested in doing. So let me just give a brief read through that staff report and get some of these comments on the record. Sorry, 100 tabs out, I'm trying to find.
Can't find the minute or the agenda anymore. Did they get deleted sometimes or?
I'm sorry?
Sometimes I just can't find the agenda. I know
This
you
was
got
It was a large packet. And the
Yeah,
agenda
no, I had it up
was
earlier today and now I can't.
But we're on 3 and 4
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now. We're coming back to that.
But then we had the actual files of that. Do you have that one in
Yeah,
there?
I have that, but it's so long that it's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back in November of 2022, ordinance 668 approved the ADO alternative dwelling overlay. As we know, that pilot program was intended to last 1 year from that date or with the cap of 150 units, whichever came first. So as we discussed today, we are under that cap. If perhaps, let's say all of the 4 applications that were considered today were approved, we'd be at 135 of the 150 units. We are, however, to the end of that sunset date for the pilot program, and we've gone now through, we're working through that 3rd round of ADO applications. So with the passing of that sunset date, ultimately, like I mentioned, we're looking to kind of take the temperature of commission on whether or not I should move forward with some of the redlined items I included in your packet, which I would think potentially, instead of digging into the details today, because it's been a long night already, maybe we could look to schedule a 1-hour workshop in advance of our next meeting on the 27th, if we like the idea of moving forward. I did include the challenges with the program, so I already have a good idea of what our talking points would be for that meeting. As you see, some of those being the HOP permits that we talked about today, and the fact that the preferred zoning district of highway commercial can be somewhat challenging based on the time constraints of that application process. I next go into that timeline of 6 months and 2 years. I know that the idea of putting that timeline on there was to get these ADO units on the ground, but potentially we might just want to evaluate at least, I think maybe the 6-month mark might be a good evaluation. It maybe could be 1 year and 2 years, something like that. So for us to consider there, Aaron kind of touched on it today with the minimum unit count thing. We had wanted to make this an accessible path forward for folks who may be doing this illegal on their property already in Spanish Valley. But, you know, those development costs, they add up. Requiring 4 units, that's a lot of impact fees. That gets pretty expensive when you have to do the buffering, fencing, road base, plantings, all of that. So it might be a consideration to evaluate if we would want to lower that to 2 or 3, or however everyone wants to maybe feel about that. The roadway and right-of-way improvements, I think that's a little bit beefier of a conversation. It might be good for the workshop to hold up on that. We kind of saw it today when we were discussing one of our ADOs. One of the applicability elements was that it would be preferred to be located on major arterial and collector roads. That would likely have been, I forget the conversation around it, but was probably discussed as a way to avoid the challenge that we saw today with one of our applicants. The easel, we don't have any, prescriptive way to get around that. We also, our construction standards currently, they don't require any improvements or widening of the road for an existing lot, for development of an existing lot. So the planning department has discussed, I think we discussed it in this group before, about potentially updating those construction standards to require developments that are adding ADTs to the road at whatever level to in fact do those improvements, whether it be
ADT.
Average daily trips
Oh, okay,
for
sorry.
transportation. So we saw that as well during, I think it was Maureen Kane. She was looking to add 32 ADO units onto Murphy Lane, and because we can't require any roadway improvements there, that's a lot of impact on that type of road. So, it's a larger question with this item because I know our engineer, one of his tasks right away are looking to rewrite construction standards But that is not something that's gonna happen quickly if we're looking to expand that. So that may be a discussion on maybe how we can tackle that challenge or leave it as is. I mentioned impact fees here because, if you're a regular, local developer person, the impact fees are probably prohibitive. But we did find out, Elisa was able to verify for me that those impact fees for these ADOs is 0.56 of the regular impact fee for that. So it's a little bit less than the regular. And while that's still expensive, it might be a bit of a perceived concern. Because if you're looking to develop your property and, and gonna be making some income on that, it's, 50% less. There was quite a bit of discussion. We were at county commission right before our round 2 of ADOs rezone applications, and we discussed the employee housing verification challenge. I think during that particular process, the county commission and, some other individuals were hoping that we had a way to verify that these units were going to be for our local workforce. And it was discussed pretty in depth that, number one, at least at that time, it would be challenging to go back and retroactively install some kind of requirement to do that. But it was also determined that when we were initially creating this ADO, that discussion, we had it in depth. The idea was to have it kind of self-regulate itself with the fines that were going to be in place, being I think $10,000 per day per issue. And so it was essentially meant to self-regulate. Ultimately, if we put something like that kind of enforcement on this, it could potentially be a little bit detrimental to the program. It would bog down enforcement. It would be very challenging because the occupancy required of these units is 60 days. That's a lot of checking. That's a lot of verification. And we might want to at least talk about it. Go ahead.
Just a thought, there's the new portal, that Hasu and Aurora Crossing are using for verification of local employment. I wonder if that could be
Yeah,
used.
we can look at it and see how it might apply to this. And I list their enforcement as number 7, and anything else you may think of before we do make another meeting for this. Do we think it might be a good idea to at least have a workshop and discuss it, whether it goes one way or the other? That way I'll know if I should be spending some staff time to update the code. The red line was in your packet, so you saw a couple suggestions I had in there.
It's the commission.
That was what I was gonna.
Yeah, what's the commission's temperature on it? I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I actually asked that. I said, should we, go right to the commission and find out? And Lisa directed me to kind of bring it to you all first, get your input, and then include your input in the staff report presentation for them.
A thought I had was, how does this tie in with future land use plan? And even two of the applicants that we had here today are in an area that's probably gonna change.
That's a good question.
I just wonder if we would have better served them if they would have been better served had they seen a future land use plan before they decided to go ahead with this.
Yeah, I found that an interesting point. We actually did have one of the county commissioners did not see favorably on one application with that basis, as not having a future land use map to base that rezone on, as opposed to doing, piecemeal rezonings. But ultimately, as I understand, the idea of the ADO was to get immediate housing, on the ground for a particular demographic. And we all knew that the future land use map was going to take some time, especially being that the ADO program was a pilot program. It wasn't, for 350 units. We wanted to get some alternative housing for folks that lead that lifestyle on the ground as quick as we could. So
I'm sorry. I guess along the same lines, from a timing standpoint, we're looking at future land use plan maybe in the spring, hopefully.
The ADO thing took
determined to
about
not
as
move
long as
forward.
that future land use plan.
Yeah.
That's so much from moving fast.
But I guess, are there people hanging out there now? Are you still getting people coming in and wanting to do applications?
I think I always will, if the option is always there. And again, to your point, it would also be a perfectly fine option to see how things play out. See how fast any of these units and applications get on the ground, and then reevaluate the challenges we saw with those. We only have an immediate brief look at what the challenges have been now with the application process.
Right.
There will be more to come with the development.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going ahead with revising this, I like the workshop because, man, this was such a long
Yeah.
sort of thing, you know, and I start to go and look at that and I think, yeah, you know, we can have discussion. We can say, okay, we want 75 more units. Oh, yes, 6 months is fine. So but I think we need time to concentrate on it. And if you only have one topic and even just an hour together, I think we could pretty much figure out what we wanted to put in front of ourselves.
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, OB. And if I could weigh in, my perspective on it would be, not even scheduling that anytime until, maybe Q2 of next year. I think to Jenna's point, let's see how these all unravel and understand what the additional complications are so we can refine it even further. And then that buys us the capacity of staff to focus on these higher order things rather than sort of a Band-Aid approach, which I think largely is what the ADO is.
I agree with you, Steve. I was gonna emphasize that we don't even know what's wrong with this thing yet. We only know what's wrong with the application process. So let's before we decide that we've had a good idea, let's see if we've had a good idea.
One thing I
Right.
might add into that as well is, if we need to expand it, since we haven't gotten to that 150 mark and we're at the year, maybe opening the date, but keeping the total quantity the same. That would be, I think, my input on what work should be done on it immediately, if any.
So if you were to do that, the code is written into land use code. So for those, few extra units that we would be going ahead and continuing, that would require the 2 public hearings of updating the land use code, etc. So it's just a thought to keep in mind, the balance of the few other units from 134 to 150 versus those public hearings.
Yeah, and unless y'all are getting a lot of interest from folks, I would say that's probably not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
I would say there might be one specific other person that was interested in it that was not able to apply in time. Other than that, I haven't had other applicants. But people read the code and they see that sunset date is hit, so.
Yeah.
I don't wanna keep dogging the thing. I do like the ADO, but I don't think we can measure its success by the number of applicants that we're getting. I think we need to measure its success by the number of people who are being housed. And I want to see those numbers before we advise you guys to spend more time on something that's going to take even longer than it did last time, right?
So if I understand, what I would do is maybe just have a quick discussion item on an agenda meeting for county commission with a staff report, letting them know your thoughts here today, that, if they would direct us to move forward, then we would do so, but your thoughts are to hold still for a moment until we discuss it further.
As long as it does not prohibit us from picking this ball back up when we think it's a good idea. I don't want to kill this program and sandbag it. I just think we should take a second, figure out if this is working or not. Or are we just tying up layers and districts and overlays and nobody has housing still?
Yeah, I see it as we're still in an emergency. Let's look for a sustainable way. I had ideas how Kate, the housing task force was we need so many units per year, and whatever the market's not providing, the ADO provides. And that was some of my things, how to get that where it's not a sunset date, but it's not 150 every year are issued. It's maybe a more digestible thing, this year we need 30 yeah, I don't know. That was kind of my 2 cents on it.
I think that's a good point. I really like that. And I think once we, maybe in the spring when the future land use plan is completed, we'll see how these merge and how they intersect and how they can work together.
I definitely see your guys' point on let's see how it what the fallout is, but I'm still I don't know, how many homeless people do we have? I feel like it's over 100.
Well, Aaron, to your point, at 134 out of 150 target, this probably is one of the more, at this point anyway, it appears to be one of the more successful initiatives we've had.
For applications.
For
Yeah, and I think that
I haven't seen the number.
Yeah.
I hope, yeah.
Well, yeah,
But we
they
see-
it takes them a while. to
we
get
do
on the
see
ground.
other
Even
examples.
these simple ones.
Like
Yeah.
Dan Stoltz project, he is at full, I was just over there, he's at full capacity. Even though he's not an ADO, he's what we modeled it after. I'm like, I mean, people are, he doesn't have a vacancy. I'm like,
Yeah.
obviously there's demand for it, so.
And he was one of our ADO applicants that has decided not to move forward with the challenges
Yeah.
for 191 and having the occupancy permit, which.
Too bad.
Yeah, it's too bad.
And Aaron, I hear your points where, you know, what I'm hearing you say is like, hey, you know, we're still like we're in crisis mode. And I guess I'll own that I've been assuming that, well, if we had staff follow this up to where we, extended this program, I guess I was assuming that, you know, that's going to take staff away from the other things that we want them to work on. And I guess I shouldn't assume on that. And that should be, you know, what staff think they have capacity for. And also as part of that, you know, fully recognizing, you know, the temptation to say yes to everything, but what's going to yield the best results, you know, in the most expedient but thoughtful way. Is it, you know, keeping your capacity available to see this future land use plan through to completion to where we can have sustainable programs and methods for people to increase density, or would a little bit of work on the side of this program and expanding it or continuing it be reasonable and not stealing away too much of your capacity?
I'm going to answer that for you, I think.
Yeah.
So, essentially the way our department is siloed a little bit is, you know, to her, praise her every day. Elisa essentially works mostly on the future land use map by herself and the future land use plan. She's our long-term planner. So she's doing those long-range plans and most of the code updates that you see here. This one for myself, I would likely be writing this update, and because I've worked intimately with all of our applicants along the way, I can pretty quickly identify the changes that need to happen or could happen or have options. So I think I would absolutely have the capacity to take this on whenever you would like to move forward. So that's my thoughts.
You know, I guess with that in mind, it may make sense to do a workshop, get these things on paper, and then if we wanted to wait until future land use plan is done in the spring to implement more, it gives us a little bit more time to get feedback on the development phase of this as well.
So maybe like 2 versions of that workshop, the application phase, and then maybe later.
The development phase, yeah.
Just get another beast developed here. Have them do it.
She's developed her own huge workload too.
Gonna ask you that, Jenna, it seems like we're dancing around the thing. I want to ask, does planning and zoning have enough help? Because as an advisory board, the real question we should be asking and looking at the county commission to answer is, are you staffed well enough? Because if that were changed, we could do everything all at once, hypothetically. So there's the question.
We'll probably never get to everything all at once.
I am amazed every day at what my coworkers and myself are able to kind of push through as far as, you know, the bulk of things that come through our office. So in any respect for any department, no doubt additional help would be helpful. Does the county have the capacity to do that? I've watched the budget workshops recently. We make it happen, you know, when we work together, we're a team and it does come together. So, you know, everyone being just aware of our capacity is so helpful, you know.
That's not to imply that you guys aren't living up to your.
Oh, no,
task.
I didn't take it that way at all. No, just the fact that you're aware and mindful that we are a small staff.
Seems like we're talking about one side of a rock, you know?
Yeah. I think I would be free to be honest if, you know, for example, this task was gonna take me away from my land development review, but I don't think in this case it really would.
Or just leave us.
I hear a yes.
Think about it a little bit.
Okay.
I will discuss with Elisa if it is worth having like a dual workshop. What about the application process challenges? Just while it's kind of like fresh in our minds about what's been going on with the ADOs, and then maybe kind of I'll put together a discussion topic for commission just to let them know what we're thinking about, engage them as well, and then come back and report to you all. We can kind of take it from there.
Good.
Oh, lovely.
Sounds Good, and there's one other item.
Can I chime in one just last thought as a kind of word of caution, and then I'll stop talking because I think I've taken enough airspace. Just to plant a seed there, since in this just being mindful of different commissions working on closely related projects or initiatives at the same time, and the confusion that can sow. I just speak from the experience of when the HDHO was created, also what was happening that time with the Planning Commission and subsequently County Commission was the assured housing plan, and I think there was one other, and things got, I think, sewn together, so anyways, I just throw that out as a word of caution for the timeline on when each body is working on these things, because I think there can be an issue of pushing too much through at the same time. So just a heads up on that.
Thank you. Sure, I mean, I'll give us a light introduction. So, I'll go ahead back to share the screen. To the point of getting another Vista, so grateful for our friend Katie here. She has been such a godsend. We started talking about this landscaping ordinance update way back in August. And, you know, with all these items coming through, I've not been able to take myself away and focus on it as much as I would like to. And Katie's really just stepped up and jumped right in there. So she has brought this together so well. And ultimately, I just kind of wanted to give everyone an update on the status. I think it was our last meeting or maybe the one before. I think McKenna just kind of threw out the question, where is the landscape ordinance? And at that time, we didn't have as much update to provide you any information. But since that time, we've had several internal meetings, and ultimately, we've kind of come to the conclusion that the landscape ordinance, we're charging our head on it. It's going well. I love it. We have like weekly meetings together, Katie and I, and we keep working on it. Additionally, one of the other tasks that the county engineer is working on, along with the construction standards update, is an update to our section of the land use code. With all of our rain events that are going on, we're discussing, you know, best management practices, alternative drainage plans for smaller developers, potential drainage requirements for single family dwellings. And after having those discussions, we pretty much determined that those two things should absolutely commingle and be designed together. Katie, I'll let you pick it up from there. Oh, of course, you have a full mouth.
Of course.
Do you need me to stop sharing screen?
No, it's good. So I think, and we have a couple attachments that we sent everyone that I would suggest looking over maybe afterwards. The agenda summary pretty much outlines some of the main questions that we're asking ourselves as we write this. And the first of those is the question of what this ordinance is for. So originally the main idea behind the ordinance was to bring us into compliance with the state of Utah's turf buyback program. That is the minimum. That is, if we do that, we're going to be accomplishing our goal. What else could this be? It could be a landscaping ordinance that really addresses water usage. And if you look at the reasons for the turf buyback program, we have, statewide, and what I've heard anecdotally is that it's worse in Grand County. Statewide, 60% of residential water usage is coming from outdoor irrigation. And if we look at neighboring counties, the city of Moab, city of St. George, Washington County, they all have much stricter landscaping requirements than what is required by the turf buyback program. So there's also an attached document that is a comparison on several issues between Moab, St. George, and Washington County. And so that's one side of that's one argument for having stricter requirements, and that means larger applicability potentially, and stricter requirements about turf generally, along with a lot of other smaller items, but those are kind of the two main questions. The argument on the other side of that is that we may not have the staff capacity to be able to review all of if we are including, for example, single family in the applicability, that means that we then have to review a landscaping plan for each potential single family development. So that's what we're weighing, basically.
Yeah.
And it's single family dwellings that are kind of the majority of.
Right, and there's a paragraph in the agenda summary with some statistics about that. I think, yeah, it's something like 60 to 70%.
And whether you do it on, I don't know if you phrased it this way, whether you do it on new housing, or do you apply it to old housing, and when would you apply it to older housing? How much change would they have to have?
Right, like the
Before you,
percentage.
yeah,
Right.
it's such an interesting question.
Right. If you look at the city of Moab, for example, they have everyone with a current existing single family house is considered legal non-conforming until you make some, large changes, and then you have to come into compliance. But in addition, every small change that you make has to come into some degree of additional compliance. So if you replace a bush, it has to be a bush on the list or something like that. So even these small things,
So it might be interesting, to kind of maybe turn it over to Mikkel a little bit. Putting you on the spot. So we all know that Moab recently did adopt their landscape ordinance. If you've reviewed it, it's quite bulky and detailed. And as I understand, there may be some challenges with implementing something like that similarly throughout the county.
Because in other words, we could learn from their experience.
As usual.
That's a great word.
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, they adopted their plan and there are already conversations about amendments to that landscape.
We voted on an amendment at our last meeting. That amendment spoke to water features. So now we're not just governing plants and, the purpose, I love a good purpose at the beginning of ordinance, that's great. It was all about being able to qualify for the church buyback program, right? That's what started the whole thing, and then it kind of snowballed into how much trees you're allowed and how much water you're gonna use to water them, and now we're at how big can your water feature be before it requires an automatic wind shut-off device so that you don't lose any of your waterfall water out into the yard. And we spent an hour discussing square footage of how much drop and how much width of your waterfall could you have without being required to have a wind shut-off device. Like it starts to get into the minutia of everyday life on like how many people actually have a waterfall feature. It just starts to be.
Yes.
And then when you talk about bringing people into compliance, it's like, are we going door to door now? It starts to be a little much.
For instance, when somebody has a plant that dies and they put in a new one, and they may want to put in the old kind that they have, and who's gonna know?
And do
I
they
mean,
have to
so
pull a
hard.
permit for that now? Now I have to process bush permits,
Right.
foliage permits.
I'm not told.
In addition to everything, which that's fine. I get paid to do that. I'm happy to do that, but that just means.
Yeah.
Building permits are gonna wait, subdivision permits are gonna, it's a lot. And do we really wanna govern foliage to this degree? So.
So I think we're kind of left at, as we're putting together the ordinance and picking things out of other codes that look good and sound good, we keep coming back to, what level of regulation does the commission want to see? Like,
And
how
the
far do we
purpose
want
of
to
it.
take this and what is the ultimate?
I think those are questions like the county commission. Because they're seeing this, we're just, planning and zoning, and they're like addressing these bigger water issues. It's like, I don't know, make everything after 10,000 gallons, $100 a gallon. I don't know, is that the best market solution instead of like, oh yeah, the wind shut off, the water features? I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, if that's kind of not, I don't know.
So, go ahead, Tony.
I'm a spirit of the law kind of thinker. And I like the turf buyback program. It's something we don't want to miss out on.
Right, no, for sure.
But if we look at that aerial photo, Moab, you're going to see green in a few certain conspicuous places. And if we want to be concerned about how the green affects our water, you're going to look at the places that are the greenest. And that's where you're going to find your savings in bulk, right? I do not think that certainly sending code enforcement guy to measure the flow of the fountain coming out of your unicorn's mouth in your backyard is a wise use of public funds. I do think that there's a middle ground. We don't necessarily want to see exotic species introduced into our ecosystems. We certainly don't want to see certain high water consumption species that are popular in landscaping used. There are, rather than a list of things that, rather than making a new list at all, it would be better to get involved with like the wheel that exists and the noxious weed department and the Division of Water Resources in other programs that they have, and spend some staff time like empowering the tools we've already got, rather than writing 30 pages of like new stuff, which sounds and looks great. But like let's get that turf buyback program going, and then we can pick it up again. We can learn a little bit more in the time that we have from the noxious weed control department, from other folks. But really, we're not going to get the results that we think we will if we're not actually like, look at the size of that pivot. It's as big as Ken's Lake. Come on, guys. You know, that's where it is. I'm not trying to call out anybody specifically. I don't know whose pivot that is, for the record. It's just a thing that I'm looking at on a wall. But that's where the water is going.
Right. So can I respond to that quickly?
Yeah.
So it is in the agenda summary, but if you look at the GWISA statistics for water use in the county, it really is majority residential. Like 80% residential.
Yeah.
I do believe that some of these green areas are using water from other sources.
Yeah, that's
Secondary water.
80% municipal water.
Right.
Is used.
Right, and of course,
For
those other water
residents.
sources are important too, right? But
Yeah.
just to bring that up.
But yeah, as a percent, I think you were talking percent of aquifer usage, and that's a different thing
No
than.
water. We're trying to say
municipal,
water.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's in my experience, if you want people to follow rules, make them simple. And I think when you're talking about water features in certain diameters and so on, that's gonna be a level of complexity that it's gonna be hard for people to buy in. So that'd be my advice, kind of along your lines, Tony, is keep it simple. Let's take advantage of the turf buyback program. If there's some common sense things to add in there, do it. And get on with life, see how it works and add to it later.
For example, I just reading through that, I love the section about like no strips less than 8 feet on roadways. Like, we don't need to be wasting that strip thing. The whole point of the turf buyback program was called Flip the Strip for years. Yeah, it's Flip the Strip. They're targeting that specific use of grass.
Yeah.
Right. So like there are some really smart things in here. But I just thinking about like, yeah, I'm familiar with what the city tried to do, and that, no.
There are some things in there that you can do, it sounds like, which is, it doesn't have a lot, well, maybe it does have a lot to do with landscaping, but it is this thing of, if you're near a secondary source of water, you've got to use it for your outdoor
That's in there.
irrigation. I know it's in there, and I just think that's really good. I mean, and that kind of forces GWISA to maybe supply more of that, two water systems sort of thing, because it is the drinking water that's the toughest for us. We don't want to be using it for agriculture or lawns.
I think Tony's points, I love the way that you had said it, it kind of added a little clarity to where you're coming from. You said, we don't want the parking strips more than 8 feet. We don't want, you know, high intensity water usage plants. We do want native. Those are the kind of like little yes and no's that we're really looking to get down to. Cause we have it in our minds, like there's gonna be a native plant list and you can't deviate from that. Or if you're gonna have something that deviates from that, they're gonna have to be in specialized hydro zones or oasis features. So we're 2 and 3 minds.
No,
So it's great.
I think you're on the right track there, and the spirit of Caradorn would smite me. But prescribing a list, one more list, is one more list that will not get updated or changed nearly as often as the science evolves. So rather than lists of species, it's better to outline principles of water use.
Who's
You know,
evaluating that though? Like a new planner, how are they evaluating that?
so like with, you know, long rooted or shallow, broad rooted species, you know, there's like cooperating with the Utah State University Extension, you know, talking to those folks, rather than like a procedural bam, 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 bam. Like these are the go species, this is not 8 feet wide, you know, 30 gallons per minute, all that stuff. Principles and best practices, like the cutting edge of planning right now is adaptive management, right? So like, instead of just, you know, a checklist, you let your plan be an educational tool, so that when someone's like, I'm gonna redo my yard, you read the plan and have it be something that they can come away with some knowledge about how to do some landscape design that's going to save a little bit of water for us, right? That's just my thought on, like, I don't know much about housing. But that's the trend in environmental planning, is planning as education, planning as, you know, teaching the principles of air and soil preservation and water, you know, transportation and sediments. It's like, you can just line it out for them, you know?
My brain just kind of goes to, you know, in a not so awesome world, let's say all 3 of us girls no longer work in the planning department, new planners walk in and they get this, you know, principled, you know, theory development of landscape plan, and they have no idea how to evaluate it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of like a black and white process. They're like, yep, that meets it. And as they evaluate it, they learn, you know, what is appropriate and what's best practice. But I love the principle approach. Guess it's meeting them both.
At the very least, the principles of good landscape design will change less slowly than how quickly we can add some random species to the noxious weed list. We do that quick over there. You know, we decided we didn't like arundo grass and got that thing listed in less than a month, you know? So that's, and now Izzy's having like banging her head against the wall for the last 3 years, trying to convince people why arundo grass is bad and why they need to swap it out. And you still see it all over town because you got holdouts. And, you know, that's just like kind of combining education with government here a little bit, right?
So what you're saying is it might be better to come at it from the other end, is here's the kind of plants we don't allow, as opposed to.
Yeah, there's definitely some plants that should be on an absolutely not list.
Yeah.
The bare minimum, the noxious weed species.
The noxious weed.
Water usage
Yeah.
plants.
Yeah, I mean, most of those plants are only on the list because they're toxic to cows anyway. But like, there's an obvious, like, you know, the left hand has to know what the right hand is doing thing going on with. We're talking about plant lists, but the, you know, also like, you don't want, Steve was talking about it last time, you don't want your xeriscaping to create a heat sink. You don't want to throw so much rock down that all of a sudden you're drying out the soil underneath it. So that's the concept, right? We're not prescribing what kind of rock, we're not prescribing how much rock it should be, but we're just putting that concept in someone's mind. Like, hey, you know, not too much rock, maybe a little bit of sod.
Just
I mean,
For the
it
guidelines.
almost sounds like the bare minimum, we really want the sod buyback. Can we just do like a bare minimum thing of what that would look like? And then like, we're not gonna enforce like, you know,
If you look at the top of the screen, that's what
That's
they're-
pretty good.
Yeah.
isn't it?
Is this
Three minimum things at the top of the
Okay.
screen that are required to be included in our updated ordinance to be a qualifying ordinance for the turf.
I'd say that's a good start, but there are these, again, simple things like, you know, something that says you gotta use secondary water if it's available. I mean, that saves a lot, and it's not terrible, it's not hard to, it's probably not hard to enforce either, much easier probably to enforce. WISA may in fact tell you, you know, if you're gonna do any outside irrigation, you gotta use this.
I'm sorry we're diving into this so deeply right now. I at least didn't see this in the email.
Yeah, was this in our packet?
I don't think this was in the packet, or else I probably would have just redlined it.
It would just been the agenda summary in the red.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I'm usually a little bit more coherent.
I can send it, we can send this whole folder back out to everyone,
Yeah.
and we just essentially wanted to update everyone that this is moving and now moving at a much greater speed. KDON, and we've, you know, identified that we want to kind of meld this with the drainage update as well. And so things are still moving. And once we send this out via email, you know, whenever you're inclined to go back and look at it, or if you hear something, you know, inspiring somewhere as something we should include, just send us a quick email and we'll kind of pop it in there where we think it goes. We'll play with that.
And I would also, send out the comparison between the counties. Because I think another thing to keep in mind is, are we gonna have something that's significantly different from what the neighboring counties have? You know, if we are being significantly less stringent than they are, do we have a good reason for that? You know, perhaps we do with staff capacity, you know, maybe they have more capacity than we do. But another thing that I would pay attention to, is, so we've talked about general, you know, complexity and amount of rules. But then there's also just numbers, you know, this 50%, the minimum, requirement, for the turf buyback is no more than 50% of front and side rear yard landscaped areas is lawn. There's a lot of variations of that are possible. Washington County, I think, is something like 25%.
So somewhere down to 10%.
Yeah, some are down to 10%. Some regulate by the size. And right now, currently, we're not, or the minimum requirements do not require this to be applied to single family residential. So that's another question, you know. I think for me, those are the biggest questions, and the variations between those two don't add a huge amount of complexity, but they do change what the effect of this is gonna be hugely. So
you'll see in there, as you do look through this, we have, you know, a couple of those sections where we haven't identified, you know, what percentage or what that number should be. And the comparison document will help us nail down, you know, how far we want to take. Yeah. Any of those numbers. So at the bottom of this is like application process. That's the easy part. And I think we all really like the idea of having the supplemental landscaping manual, because we can update that as needed. That's the item that's likely going to be referenced within the updated drainage plan for alternative drainage options for small development, as opposed to spending $3,000 on a drainage plan for a subdivision of 2 lots. That's not really achievable for some of our. And that was
Good.
the end of our update for you.
So does anybody have any future, what are they called? Future considerations? Good.
We're taking after the county. It's 7:45.
I know.
Mike did this to us.
You're doing it, you can practice.
Actually, no, guys. Well done. Several points that, I mean, process is never easy.
Yeah.
Sorry I was so late.
Oh, but you gotta say the word adjourn for me.
What do I,
I'll move to adjourn.
how many are in favor of adjourning?
Thank you.
So before you pop out, it might
We
be
thought,
helpful
Steve and God.
for everyone to know, now that, well, as soon as we do get our new commissioner on, we're gonna look to kind of tightening up a couple of our structural things with number one, potentially where we sit, number two, kind of how our public interacts with our, you know, internal commission discussion. Recently, there's been some challenge with some internal conversation that happened and we were trying to capture it in a public comment. It wasn't very clear. So we're gonna look to tighten up a couple of those things and one of them is probably gonna be everyone up.
Everybody up again.
So get excited. We're gonna get your name, place and all of that.
Did you say our county liaisons changed?
I'm sorry?
County liaisons.
Oh, yeah, where's Trish? That's my next plan.
You said something.
No, they're not. Our new commissioner.
Trish, you guys.
Our- the people- well, one of the
Oh,
people-
the planning, I thought you meant county liaison.